Wow! Saint Peter? Portrayed by Christopher Lee?
Yes, it is me, child. Now I must do a background check to make sure you are worthy of entering heaven. Alright, everything looks good. Some hiccups, but nothing too severe.
Oh, great. So, can I come in now?
One last thing. It's a new policy. Really just a formality.
Oh, what's that?
We just need to check any group chats you may be in.
Oh.
I got dead again. This stinks.
Welcome to Heck, mortal. It is here that your unworthy spirit will spend the rest of its miserable existence.
Oh, fair enough, I guess. What's my punishment?
This!
Really? That's it? A chair?
Oh, hell is not the chair, but how you must sit in it.
And how's that?
You must sit perfectly still and not fiddle around or tap your foot or stretch your arms.
Oh no! Man, I can't take this no more! Ah! Hey, red guy!
What?
Can I, make a deal to get out of here? I really don't want to be in hell anymore.
Hey, we don't use that word here.
What?
The H word.
Oh, sorry. But seriously, is there any way out?
I don't know, it's not my department. I'm just the guy that introduces new souls to their eternal torment.
Okay, well, then where can I find someone that does know?
I think Satan is on the next circle down. If anybody would know, it would be him.
Well, I guess if that's my only choice. So, can I leave this chair?
I don't care.
Okay, thanks. Bye!
Wow, it's so cold here. Just like home.
Wait, what's that?
Hey, Satan, is that you?
Cool. So, I don't really want to be here, so I was wondering if there was, some sort of deal I could make to maybe, come back to life.
A deal. A wager for such an immense gain must have a risk of a loss equal to that which would be gain.
You lost me, bud.
I will present to you a challenge. If you fail, you'll suffer inversely equal to the amount you would have gained if you had succeeded.
Okay, what's the challenge?
You must complete the ultimate challenge. You shall name every variant and derivative of the AK rifle. If you succeed, your life will be restored how it was before your demise. If you fail, you will be sent to Asmodeus' Nigga Super Forever Rape Palace Deluxe for all eternity.
You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Satan, but I accept.
So be it. Let the challenge
Begin. The Automat Kalashnikova, or Kalashnikov's automatic rifle, was designed by, you guessed it, Pablo from the Backyardigans. During the Great Cartoon War of 2007, the Nickelodeon forces were engaged in heavy fighting with Cartoon Network. Pablo was in a field hospital after a shoulder wound he suffered at the Battle of Dinner Time, where he heard a Nickelodeon soldier lamenting about how the Nickas had only one rifle for 2 or 3 men, while the Cartoon Network soldiers had automatics. So, he decided to design one. All of this is 100% factually correct, and if you say I'm wrong, you're racist. Anyway, the first concept in 1942 was an SMG. Then, in 1943, it was an LMG. He was then told that other weapons designers were making guns for this fancy new intermediate cartridge, the M43 7.62 by 39mm. So he designed an auto-loading carbine similar to the M1 Garand, but lost the weapons trial to the SKS. Then, in 1946, he designed 3 automatic assault rifles similar to the German STG-44, which were accepted for further testing. Eventually, one of his assistants, Alexander Zaitsev, suggested that he redesign the rifle, which he was hesitant about, but eventually he agreed to do so. The redesigns were completed in 1947 and were trialed by the Army in 1948. Although promising, the design was found to be unsatisfactory for full auto fire, leading to some guys named Vasily Liuty and Boris Cannell to rework the design, although said redesign was never used. In 1949, the finalized AK-47 design was accepted by the Soviet Army as the Avtomat Kalashnikova, or AK for short. That means that officially it's not the AK-47 and is, in fact, just the AK. Only for a small period of time from late 1948 to mid-1949 were pre-adoption Type 1 AK rifles officially designated as the AK-47, but when they were officially adopted, they went back to the designation of simply AK. It's sort of like how calling an AR-15 an AR isn't correct. The inverse is true for the AK. Think of the AKM. It's not the AK-47M or the AKM-47, it's just the AKM. So now you can be a pretentious douchebag that constantly reminds his friends that it's not an AK-47, it's just an AK. Also, I'd like to thank all the folks who made this video possible, including Rob Stott, whose channel will be linked in the description. His amazing work was extremely helpful when researching for this video, and you should definitely go check him out. Seriously, go do it. He's a G. Okay, now we can begin. To start out, we obviously should start with the country where the AK originated. After the prototypes and pre-production models, the first AK for production was the early stamped receiver with a milled front trunnion and weird 2-piece grips. Early production models of the rifle have wood grips, while later models have Bakelite grips. In much the same way, early models had a flatter gas tube lever with the tab higher up, while later versions have a step here and the tab moved to the end of the lever. Keep in mind, there's no official Type 1 designation. That's just what the original stamped receiver models are referred to as to differentiate them from rifles with the later 2 receiver patterns. Interestingly, despite not being a submachine gun, it was adopted to fill the role of one, as the Soviet Army had made the move to use the 7.62x39mm cartridge for all of its primary small arms, replacing their 7.62x54mm rimmed Mosin-Nagant rifles with the SKS, their 7.62x54mm rimmed DP machine guns with the RPD, and the 7.62x25mm PPSH-41 and PPS-43 submachine guns with the AK. However, the Soviet brass realized that the AK was just better than the SKS, so they just gave everyone an AK, as good socialists should. Now, before moving on, I'm going to give you a rundown on all the parts that make up the Type 1 AK, just so you're not lost when I point any out. Starting at the end of the barrel, we have the muzzle nut, also known as a thread protector, is held in place by this little stub here, the muzzle retaining pin. The front sight base, which is obviously a base for the front sight, which can be adjusted by the windage drum here. Side note, this little cutout here on the bottom of the sight base is for locking on a bayonet. Barrel, cleaning rod, gas block. This takes some of the gas going out the barrel and redirects it into the gas tube, which vents excess gases and guides the gas piston. What does that do? We'll get back to that. For now, we're moving on to the lower handguard retainer, which has a built-in front sling loop and also holds the lower handguard retainer lever. Then, there's obviously the lower handguard itself, along with the upper handguard, with the lower handguard ferrule at the rear of the former. Rear sight block, which mounts to the rear sight, which itself holds up the rear sight elevation assembly. On the right side of the sight block, there's a gas tube retaining lever. Front trunnion. Don't know what trunnion is? Well, I'm no engineer, but what's important is that it's pretty much just a block of metal that other pieces are screwed or riveted onto. The receiver's the main body of the rifle and what everything else is built around. Bolt carrier. Remember when I mentioned the gas piston? Well, I'm going to go in depth on how this thing works now. You see, when the gun shoots, it takes some of the pressurized gases from the burning gunpowder through the gas block and uses it to push the gas piston back, which moves the bolt carrier backwards. This carries the bolt along with it, pulling the spent casing out of the chamber, at which point the extractor kicks it out of the ejection port like a belligerent drunk out of a bar. Then, the recoil spring pushes the bolt carrier assembly forward, chambering a new round and locking the bolt in the battery, resetting the whole process. Back to the visible components of the rifle, we have the selector switch, which not only swaps between safe, auto, and semi-firing modes, but also serves as a dust cover when in the safe position. Dust cover retaining button, magazine, trigger guard, magazine catch, trigger, grip. Rear trunnion, held in place with 3 flush rivets, has 2 metal tangs to attach the stock, rear sling swivel, butt plate trap door. Finally, we have the access pins for the trigger, hammer, and auto sear. And that's the basic rundown of the AK rifle and its components. Now back to it. Because of the high rejection rates for the Type 1 AK, they transitioned to using a milled receiver in 1951, becoming what is known as the Type 2 AK. Now, you may be asking, why is it still officially just the AK if they changed so much of it? To that, I answer, I don't know. I guess I just thought that the changes didn't warrant a change in the name. If you really want to know, ask the Soviets. Oh wait, you can't, because they don't exist anymore.
I'm a Soviet. Shut up!
Regardless, this version is very transitional, and depending on the year, is often a mix-up of parts from the Type 1, transitional parts that would be dropped before the next receiver type was introduced, and some parts that would be used for years to come. As for the features of the Type 2, it's notable for its big old milled receiver with its rectangular lightning cut, weird stock tang socket, thicker stock with a deeper angle, newer wood grip, and a trigger guard that's marginally thinner and wider here where it's riveted. Also, although not really visible, the Type 2 AK also introduced a chrome line to chamber and barrel. Throughout its production life, the Type 2 AK underwent many part replacements. Some of the earliest changes were extending the end of and adding an opening on the bottom of the selector lever, updating the dust cover retaining button, removing a notable amount of metal from the back of the gas block, changing the fluting of and positioning of the vent holes on the gas tube, and making the front sight marginally slimmer. Not long after its inception, they removed the checkered pattern on the grip. Around the middle of its production life, the selector switch was changed again, having another tab added here to the top of the lever. Later, they changed the location of the front sling loop, moving it from the rear handguard retainer to the gas block. Finally, they beveled the bottom of the front sight post hole in the back of the rear sight block, shaved a lot of excess metal off the front of the gas block, and added a recess here on the selector switch. Alongside this, they replaced the solid wood stock, grip, and handguard with versions made of laminate birch, which is not only cheaper, but also stronger and lighter. You can identify it because of the little pins in the wood for reinforcement, and the thinner, straighter angle of the stock. It was also a somewhat common custom modification for the rear sling swivel to be moved from the bottom of the stock to the side of it, which would become an official feature on rifles decades later. Eventually, further revisions were made to the weapon from 1953 to 1955, which resulted in the Type 3 receiver. This became the most produced version out of the original 3 AK models, being produced until 1959. This one has a different milled receiver, which is no longer stepped, has the lightning cuts parallel to the bottom of the receiver instead of the top, and does away with a stock socket. Also, the rear sling mount was moved from the stock to the left side of the receiver, lightning cuts were added to the bottom of the dust cover, and the dimples to hold the selector lever in position were changed to notches. Finally, although not a change to the gun itself, a new pattern of magazine was adopted, this new version being stamped out of thinner steel with reinforcing ribs instead of the former slab-side magazine. Shortly after the rifle's adoption, the gas tube latch was updated to have a step here. At the very end of the rifle's production life, they moved the front sling loop back to the lower handguard retainer, introducing a new gas tube without the loop and a new lower handguard retainer with a smaller sling loop than that of the Type 1 and early Type 2. Around the time of the rifle's production life, they experimented with this very unique pattern of magazine that was made out of aluminum instead of steel, but it was never produced in significant quantities. Underfolder version of the Type 1, 2, or 3. The stock is inspired by the MP40's folding stock. Version of the Type 3 with an early side rail. Introduced in 1959, it features a 1mm thick stamped receiver with a new front trunnion, a straighter stock, a ribbed dust cover, a new selector switch, a thinner barrel, a new front sight post, a bolt carrier that's been painted black, and a different rear sight block with a new rear sight that goes up to 1,000 meters instead of 800. The AKM receiver is flat at the back and uses only one stock tang, while with the Type 3 AK it's angled and uses 2 tangs. The handguard has a palm swell for better grip, no rear ferrule, and a water drainage hole on the bottom. The vents on the gas tube have been moved to the sides of the gas block, which itself has had even more metal shaved off the back and a bayonet lug added to the bottom. It also has a new trigger, a spacer above the trigger guard with a stop for the selector switch, and a new magazine release. Finally, the AKM uses a press-fitted and pinned barrel instead of the AK's thread-on barrel. In 1960, shortly after the rifle's inception, they updated the muzzle nut to have a second groove near the base. In 1963, they added lightning cuts to the front sight post and gas block, as well as the bolt carrier, giving it a stepped shape. Around 1963 to 1964, they started issuing them with a new pattern of bakelite grip instead of the wood grip used up to that point, and also extended the lightning cut on the dust cover, making it curve upwards. In 1966, they replaced the updated muzzle nut with a slanted compensator, which itself went through 3 forms. Around 1965 to 1968, the magazines were swapped from the ribbed steel pattern to new orange magazines constructed from a compound known as AG4, which is made of fiberglass reinforced polymer and not bakelite, contrary to popular belief. In 1971, they introduced a new cast gas block, which can be identified by its different, more angled shape. The front sight block was also changed to a cast version, identifiable by its more square hole at the front and the lack of a lightning cut on the front. The following year, they moved the rear sling swivel on the stock and modified the dust cover to be flared near the ejection port. In 1974, they added a lip to the top of the dust cover retaining button. One extra thing, although not visible from the outside, the rear trunnion was changed twice in the rifle's production life, from the original pattern that kinda looked like a female side release buckle to a donut pattern in 1962, and ultimately to the finalized forked version in 1970. Underfolder AKM. Note that the stock is not only a different pattern to that of the AKS, being a stamped stock rather than a milled one, but the angle is also much straighter than on the AKS. Unlike the fixed stock AKM, the AKMS never transitioned to using bakelite grips, as the Soviets believed that the bakelite grip was too fragile if dropped with the stock folded. AKM with one of the 10 billion different mount variants. There are 2 different main versions depending on the scope mounted, those being the railed underfoldy. The stock is slightly different to accommodate the side rail, being bulged on the one side with a cutout. AKM with a PKM similar flash hider, optional bipod, and early rail mount for the 1PN27/NSP3 scope. Underfolder with early rail mount and flash hider and shit. Illuminated radium sights, fella. The sight piece is attached to the front and rear sights. Theoretically, you could potentially smack together the AKMP with a folding stock or a night sight mount to make some crap like Underfolder AKM with a PBS-1 suppressor and a special rear sight for firing subsonic ammo. It can also accept the BS-1 Tishina silenced grenade launcher with corresponding sights. Now, despite what Tarkov says, there's no technical classification for an AKM-B, as only the folding stock model got this setup. Now that we're done with those, here's a quick little summary of the different AK letter suffixes that determine which variation it is. Squad automatic weapon variant of the AKM, notable for being a big boy. It has a thicker 1.5mm receiver, a longer heavy barrel which usually sports a bipod, a clubfoot stock, and a dip handguard that's thicker than the standard pattern handguards and thus isn't interchangeable. It has a big round boy rear sight, a unique gas block that doesn't have a bayonet lug, and uses a front sight block mostly similar to the Type 3 pattern, save for a cutout near the rear to accommodate the bipod, and no cutouts here where bayonet would otherwise be locked. Strangely, the RPK uses a smooth dust cover like the Type 3 rather than the ribbed dust cover of the AKM, and also uses a muzzle nut rather than the slanted compensator. Although it accepts standard AK magazines, it typically sports an extended 40-round magazine or a 75-round drum magazine. Early production models had the magazine well dimple, while later models saw it removed. Side folding stock version. The rear of the receiver is slanted to allow for the stock to fold at the correct angle. You can identify it by the hinge mechanism, hole here, extra rivet here, and the location of the sling loop. Night sight squad automatic weapon. Night sight side folder with a cutout in the stock for the side rail. AKM rechambered in a 545x39mm with a new muzzle brake and slightly different front sight which sports a bayonet lug, as the muzzle brake makes using the lug and the gas block impossible. The lug and the gas block is retained, however, for mounting grenade launchers and such. The stock is slightly different and has a lightning cut in the side, as well as a ribbed butt plate, while the handguard has a dip above the palm swell and a little metal spring piece here. Also, the front sight post has this little circular piece here. This is a retainer for the muzzle retaining pin. The pin was previously retained by the front pin holding the sight post onto the barrel, but that isn't possible due to the pins being moved to the bottom of the sight block. One of the most interesting changes was the addition of a new trigger guard with an angled rear and only one rivet on each side securing it to the receiver. However, this change was almost immediately undone for one reason or another. Also, the first pattern of the ribbed butt plate was rubber instead of metal, identifiable by its thicker shape. The first pattern of muzzle brake featured a fourth hole on the bottom left of the brake, but it was removed in 1975. Early models retained the AKM cast gas block, but it was replaced in 1977 by a vertical gas block, with a lightning cut being added to the front sight alongside it. In 1978, they added a little dimple on the dust cover above the top tab of the selector switch. In 1979, they introduced a new muzzle brake with slits cut into the front, having zigzag vent holes in the slits. Around 1981, they changed the dust cover again by making the ribs less prominent. They also updated the rear sight block with a beveled version. In 1982, they updated the trigger with a thinner version and also introduced a magazine made of polymer instead of AG4, which is identifiable not only by its plum color, but also by the ribs added to the step at the front of the magazine. In 1983, they beefed up the charging handle and replaced the magazine catch with a new pattern that's longer and more rectangular, with the sides shaved, leaving a rib going down the middle and a barely noticeable curve at the end. However, this was almost immediately replaced in 1984 by a new pattern with a dimple on the front face instead of the shaved sides and no curled end. The same year, they also removed the vent holes in the upper handguard. However, these were quickly replaced in 1985 when the new pattern of polymer furniture began to be introduced. The ribbed butt plate was updated for the polymer stock, with the screws being closer to the top and bottom compared to the version on the wood stock. Also, they updated the muzzle brake to have a slope leading up to the base, but also removed the zigzag vents. Side note, as you can see, the newer pattern of polymer furniture has a unique plum color. Now, this is by no means an intentional or stylistic choice. You see, the Soviets originally wanted black furniture, but unfortunately for them, they were the Soviets. So, the closest their Ooga Booga caveman technology could get was this plum color. Back to it. Around 1985, they introduced a new method of affixing the front sight base and gas block to the barrel by squeezing them onto the barrel with dimples rather than having them be held in place with pins. Alongside this, they added a little semicircle cut on the left side of the trigger guard plate. In 1986, they made the bevel at the rear of the muzzle brake slightly shorter and also reduced the bevel at the front of the hole. In 1988, they introduced a stamped gas tube latch with a different pattern and also changed the magazine catch, removing the tapers on the sides of the dimple. In 1990, the muzzle brake was once again changed, with a thick part being extended to the vent hole on the right. In 1991, they introduced a new front sight with a more round hole, no lightning cut, and with the rib above the windage drum extending to below it as well. However, that was a minor change compared to what else changed that year. You see, in 1991, the Soviet Union was able to level up its tech tree enough to synthesize their polymer in a true shade of black. Finally, the Soviets were at long last able to achieve the black furniture color they've wanted for so long. You know what else happened in 1991? Version of the side-folding skeleton stock. The receiver has accommodations for the folding stock, such as a hinge reset stock, a button release, a latch to hold the stock, as well as the rear of the receiver being slanted to allow it to fold at the proper angle. For the first few years of its production life, the AKS-74 actually used the wood grip featured on the early AKM models. The first version of the stock had a flat left side of the butt with a cutout for this rivet on the front trunnion, while the receiver had a rear angle of around 3 degrees. The second pattern of the stock has a bulged portion for the stock catch, eliminating the need for a cutout, along with the rear slant of the receiver being increased to 4 degrees and the catch hook for the stock being made thicker. The final stock setup sports a reinforced rear trunnion with a 6-degree angle, identifiable by this rivet being closer to the selector switch, as well as the stock catch hook being further thickened. The stock itself has had the bulged portion moved lower down to accommodate the new folding angle and 2 drainage holes added to the butt. Night sight version. Side folding night boy. Famous Krinkov AKS-74 PDW. Shortened, muzzle booster instead of a brake, new sights, latched dust cover, and a dust cover retaining button with a more hooked shape. Originally, it used the stock of the standard AKS-74, but this was updated after a few years by a new version, with the rear of the bottom strut being more angled where it connects to the butt itself being ribbed, and the struts being rolled at the openings. Initially, the rear sight assembly was a separate piece further back on the dust cover, but this was very quickly changed to a version with the assembly being connected to the top cover latch. Early versions had a vented handguard with a unique shape, while later models with no vents were phased in around 1985. Around 1986, they swapped the magazine catch to a new, longer pattern with a pill-shaped divot. The first pattern of muzzle booster had a long bevel at the rear and a more rounded portion here, but in 1981 they updated it by shortening the bevel at the rear and adding a relief in the middle. They updated it once again in 1987, removing the bevel at the rear entirely. Like the AK-74, the Krinkov too swapped to using a dimpled gas block in front sight. Why is it called the Krinkov? Well, it's a long and convoluted story, but it essentially has to do with the Pashto-speaking Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan and the way they pronounced Kalashnikov, mixed with how American journalists heard it, essentially jumping from Kalashnikov to Krinkov. Regardless, there are various wacky accessories made for it too, including a hip holster and 2 operational briefcases, one with the muzzle booster removed to fit in the case, and another with the crink at a different angle to hold it while still retaining the muzzle. Same version, but with a side mount for a night sight. Although I'm not sure why you would put the traditional scope on it, as you'd end up with more scope than gun. AKS-74U with a PBS-4 suppressor and special subsonic sights. It can also accept the BS-1 Tishna silenced grenade launcher with corresponding sights. AK-74 squad automatic weapon with a new flash hider and a slightly different gas block. Side foldy boy saw. Like the previously mentioned RPKS and AKS-74, the rear of the receiver is slanted. Scoper 74, Scopy Foldaboy. In 1991, the Soviets set out to modernize the AK once more. The primary results from this effort were a new side-folding full stock and a standardized scope mount. The Soviet Army was so impressed with the efficacy of the improved product that they replaced all previous standard-length AK-74 rifles with a new AK-74M. Less noticeably, the rear trunnion and its hinge mechanism were reinforced, identifiable by the cutout in the stock hinge. Initially, they sported the ribbed dust cover used on the previous models, but this was almost immediately changed to a new, smooth dust cover. The first pattern of stock had an oval button and only one pit in the left side of the stock, while the second pattern introduced around 1996 had a longer, circular button, 2 side pits, and a cleaning kit compartment. At some point, they updated the trigger guard spacer to have the same semicircle cutout of the trigger guard plate. Around 1997, they added an extra bump rivet here on the left side of the receiver, which starts the rotation of the bolt when the weapon is cycled, when this was previously done by a part of the feed ramp. Once again, the magazine catch was swapped to a version with a more pronounced hole and an open bottom. The rear sight was changed as well, with the left end of the drum being tapered rather than stepped. The side rail was also changed at some point, swapping to a version with much thinner rails. It seems that the stock catch hook was also reduced in thickness at some point. In 2006, they started adding this little slot in the stock to allow for the grenade launcher recoil pad to be strapped on better, and changed the dust cover retainer to have a push button to help the cover stay on when the grenade launcher is fired. Finally, around 2009, they made the base of the grenade launcher lug on the gas block as thick as the diameter of the gas block. Modernized RPKS-74N with its distinct ribbed black polymer furniture. It typically sports improved magazines made by Molot. 5.56x45mm NATO RPK-74M meant for export. Same as the last, but in 7.62x39mm. 5.56x45mm NATO AK-74M. Carbine version of the AK-101. It has a Krinkov-style muzzle brake. The rear iron sight only goes out to 500 meters. 7.62x39mm AK-74M. 7.62x39mm carbine. Carbine AK-74M. The AK-100 models also come in the -1 variant, which is semi-auto only, as well as the -2 variant, which has the auto mode replaced by a burst function. Also, I'd like to state that there is no technical classification for the AK-100, but for all intents and purposes, the AK-74M is the AK-100. Alexandrov Kalashnikov 107, which is an AK-74M with the fancy balanced automatic recoil system, first used by a prototype Kalashnikov pattern rifle known as the AO-38. 5.56x45mm NATO variant of the AK-107. 7.62x39mm version, you get it. 9x39mm AK carbine based on the 100 series. It has a railed handguard, the grip of the PP1901 Vityaz, which will be discussed soon, and houses the cleaning rod in the stock. Prototype AK-103 with a new stock, magazine, a railed handguard, and a new railed dust cover that's latched to the new rear sight block. In the early 2010s, Kalashnikov concerns set out to make a new and improved AK, leading to the creation of a prototype rifle designated as the AK-12. Changed almost every part of the AK, being an almost entirely new rifle rather than a modified version of the previous rifles. It has a new receiver, ambidextrous selector switch with a 3-round burst feature in addition to auto and semi, reversible charging handle, adjustable folding stock, ergonomic grip, rail-mounted rear sight, taller front sight, and longer muzzle brake with 2 slots. It also has a railed handguard, top cover, and gas block. There are various models of the prototype, with various changes made throughout its experimentation. A further modernized version of the AK-74M/Series 100, this model being the 545x39mm rifle. It was originally referred to as the AK-100M series, but was later changed to be the AK-200. It has a new stock mounted on a buffer tube, a new grip, railed handguard and dust cover, the dust cover itself being latched to the new sight block, classic AK-style sights that only go out to 800 meters, a windowed magazine, a new flash hider, and an improved selector switch. 5.56x45mm AK-200. Models not chambered in 5.45x39mm don't have the same pattern of magazine we saw in the previous rifle. Carbine AK-201. 7.62x39mm AK-200. Carbine AK-203. Carbine AK-200. Prototype AK-103 derivative with the grip and stock of the AK-200, a new railed free-float handguard and a new barrel setup, muzzle brake, sighted gas block, gas tube, rear sight, and trigger. There's also this latch here, which on almost every other model of AK would be a gas tube latch, but is actually what allows the dust cover to swivel open. Since the proposed variant of the AK-12 is too complex and expensive to manufacture, they instead modified the AK-400 and redesignated it as the AK-12. There's a lot of controversy and drama regarding this one, with a litany of alleged issues and drawbacks, but that's not what we're discussing today. As for the gun itself, there's 4 firing modes: safe, auto, 2-round burst, and semi. External features include the stock, grip, and magazine of the AK-200 series, with a new handguard, dust cover, rear and front sight, which is integrated into the gas block, a new gas tube and handguard setup, which is retained by this pin here in the receiver, and a new barrel setup, muzzle brake, and selector switch. In 2020, the stock, grip, and rear sight were updated, with the stock no longer using a buffer tube, the grip now enveloping the trigger guard, and the rear sight using a new rotary design system. In 2021, they updated the stock to have an adjustable cheek piece and the selector switch to be operated by an ambidextrous thumb latch. Additionally, they removed the 2-round burst fire mode as they came to discover that it wasn't really actually all that useful. Production models of the previously discussed AK-200 series rifles were also updated to have the 2020 model of stock and the 2021 ambidextrous selector. In 2023, they changed the handguard out for a less heat-conductive one and the muzzle brake out for a new flash hider. They also seem to have replaced this dust cover release latch with just a pin. This new model was designated as the AK-12M1. There's also the special-purpose AK-12SP, which is a 2021 model but has a 2020 stock and an M-lock upper handguard. Also the AK-12SPK, which has a shorter barrel, a lengthened 2-piece M-lock handguard, and a new flash hider. Short barrel version with a new flash hider. Super short barrel version with a new stock, foregrip, and rail-mounted front sight. 7.62x39mm version of the AK-12. Compact 7.62x39mm version. Subcompact version with a new stock and rail-mounted front sight. 5.56x45mm version of the AK-12. Short barrel version with a new flash hider. 7.62x51mm NATO version of the AK-12. It has a strengthened receiver and a new flash hider. Updated versions have a new handguard with M-lock slots. RPK version of the AK-12. It has an RPK pattern receiver, a new handguard, a 95-round drum, a slightly tweaked hooded front sight, a new flash hider, and a different vertical pattern of dust cover retainer. It comes in 2 configurations, one having a 550mm barrel and the other having a 370mm barrel. Civilian semi-auto versions of the AK-12, 15, and 19. Updated version of the TR3 with a left-side charging handle, a spring-loaded side cover, and a split receiver, the upper of which can be swapped out for different barrel lengths and calibers. And that's it for the Russian evolution of the AK and its primary variants. Now we'll be moving on to Russian guns that aren't members of the main AK or RPK line. Wait, what's that noise?
Leonid Brezhnev? What are you doing here?
Wanna kiss?
No, but I appreciate the offer.
Oh, okay.
Alright, that's great. Back into the pit of eternal darkness with you, please. Alright, where were we?
9x18mm AK SMG with a helical magazine, retroactively labeled as the Bison 1 after the updated Bison 2 was developed. The primary differences between the two are the front and rear sights, side rail, muzzle, handguard, magazine, and the magazine attachment point. The Bison 2 also has a variety of sub-variants, which are variant chambered 9x19mm Parabellum rather than 9x18 Makarov with a 53-round magazine instead of the standard 64-round magazine. Bison 2 chambered in 380 ACP with the same 64-round magazine capacity as the original. Variant with an integral suppressor. Semi-auto Bison 2. Semi-auto Bison 201. Semi-auto Bison 202. 7.62x25mm Tokarev Bison 2 that uses PPSH 41 magazines instead of the typical helical ones. It has a different handguard than the other Bisons, as well as the AKS-74U style rear sights. They also appear to use the AK-74M style full polymer stocks rather than the AKS-74U style metal skeleton stock. There's also the Bison 3, which features a top folding stock rather than the previously discussed stocks. Regular magazine AK chambered 9x19mm Parabellum with a new grip and muzzle device, a latched dust cover, and an extra rivet here. The Vityaz has its own variants as well, which are no side rail, rail to dust cover. Modernized version of the PP1901 similar to the AK-12. Civilian version of the PP1901. It comes with either a standard length or lengthened barrel. Civilian versions of the AK-100 series that will not fire if the stock is folded. Formerly referred to as the MK-107, the SR-1 is a civilian derivative of the AK-108 with a Stanag magazine adapter, ambidextrous charging handle, unique railed handguard with M-lock slots, first pattern AK-12 grip, a CAA tactical SBS stock, a unique muzzle brake and rail dust cover, an AKM receiver with no selector switch, and a new trigger. AK rifle clones in various different calibers. There's a lot of different variants and models, but for the sake of everyone's sanity, I'm only referring to the rifle stock ones. They come in the following cartridges. Rifle stock shotgun AK in 12 gauge, 20 gauge, and 410 bore. The 20 has a different pattern of receiver, and the 410 has one different to that of the 20. Also, the 410 has a different handguard to the 12 and 20. Folding stock shotgun AK. Korotkaya short-barreled folding stock shotgun AK. Saiga 12K that, due to Russian laws, won't fire if the stock is closed, not because of any mechanical thing, but because the gun itself is such a proud Russian patriot that it refuses to do so. Saiga 12K with the folding stock of the SVDS, the handguard of the AK-74M, a railed gas block and dust cover that's latched to the sight block, an extended magwell, new grip, and muzzle. Short barrel version of the last one. Saiga 12K with a polymer AK-74 stock and extended magwell. Version with an ambidextrous charging handle, buffer tube rear with a CAA tactical SBS stock, rail dust cover, hybrid handguard, new rear sight block and gas block, and a new muzzle. Saiga 12K with a bolt hold open feature, new adjustable stock, modernized furniture, and a muzzle that allows for mounting barrel extensions. A Saiga 410 set up like the AK-74M without a muzzle, bayonet lug, or accommodation for cleaning rod. Version with a shorter barrel and a standard AK-74M front sight and gas block. A Krinkov-style Saiga 410 with a muzzle and gas block similar to the AKS-74U. Essentially a longer-barreled version of the Saiga 410-02 but with a fixed stock. AKS-74 skeleton folding stock version. AK-74M folding stock version. A series of custom Saiga shotguns produced by a company called Legion Limited, which feature SVD furniture and a variety of other custom parts. This thing is technically an AK derivative. It comes in 308 and 30-06. Next! Civilian clone of the AK-74M, chambered in 366 TKM with a railed handguard and no accommodation for a cleaning rod. There's also a wood furniture version made to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the AK. Hunting rifles in various different calibers, such as 7.62x39, 7.62x51 NATO, 6.5 Grendel, and plenty of others built around the RPK base. There's like 1,009 of these, but you can identify them by their RPK receivers and furniture having either polymer, wood, or both. Demilitarized semi-auto AKM. Practically indistinguishable from an AKM at a glance, it does, however, have some major differences. Mainly, it's chambered in 366 TKM instead of the standard 7.62x39mm.
But how
How do you determine if one is a VPO 209 from the outside, you ask? Well, you can tell, because it says it on the side of the gun, you retard. RPK receiver AKS-74U with a new grip and sometimes a suppressor. 5.56 version. 7.62x39 version. Vepr rifle with unique furniture, an M-lock handguard, and a quick-change barrel system that allows the operator to switch from firing either 7.62x39, 366 TKM, or 6.5 Grendel by swapping out just the barrel. A Saiga 12K derivative built off the RPK. It has a unique folding stock with a cheek rest, extended magwell, ergonomic grip, rail dust cover latched to the sight block, a gas block which is similar to those of the AK-100 carbines, a unique front trunnion, an improved selector switch, and an optional muzzle brake. It also features a last round bolt hold open feature. Version with a 520mm barrel and permanently fixed muzzle. Version with a 680mm barrel and a fitting for different chokes. Version with a 305mm barrel. Version for the IPSC with a buffer tube stock, new gas block, and specialized furniture. The Evtomet Dini Koksorova 971 is a heavily modified AK derivative with a balanced automatic recoil system. It has a 3-round burst option in addition to the automatic firing mode. There's also the AEK 971S, which has a new grip with an ambidextrous selector switch, a new muzzle brake, and a collapsible stock. 5.56mm version. 7.62x39mm version. There's also the AEK 973S, which is just the 7.62x39 version of the previously discussed AEK 971S. This one's really pushing the envelope of being an AK derivative. Really the only things about it that still resemble an AK are the barrel, the charging handle, and the general shape. We could go further into if something is really still an AK if you replace all the parts, but that's a matter that falls under one's own philosophical purview. Anyway, it's essentially a further enhanced AEK 971, crossing the aforementioned with the external features of the MP5A3. During development, it was previously known as the A545. 7.62x39mm version of the 6P67, previously known as the A762 during development. Versatile PDW prototype in various different 9mm calibers based on the AKS-74U. 9x39mm conversion of the AKS-74U, of which only 350 were ever officially made. It mostly resembles a standard AKS-74U, with the most notable differences being the distinct 20-round magazine and the different muzzle device, which appears to be a compensator rather than a muzzle booster. Specialized bullpup AKS-74U in 7.62x39mm that was produced in limited numbers. It has the following 4 variants: foregrip barrel, handguard barrel version with an AK-74 type barrel configuration, previous version with a suppressor and sniper scope, grenade launcher barrel with a muzzle brake. Experimental version in 5.45x39mm. Experimental version in 5.56x45mm. The most popular Groza variant being chambered 9x39mm. It also has 4 sub-variants: grenade launcher barrel, foregrip barrel, short threaded barrel for a suppressor, suppressor barrel, and sniper scope. Prototype double barrel AK-74. Failed belt-fed RPK-74 with a feed cover on the left side of the receiver. Reconfigured prototype version with a new receiver, a collapsing stock, the gas system flipped upside down, and a new feeding mechanism that feeds from the side rather than the bottom with a feed cover on the top. Another reworked version with a solid stock and a new bipod setup. This, along with the previous 2 iterations, were never adopted or produced as the RPK-74 was already good enough. Prototype amphibious rifle that can fire not only specialized drones for use underwater, but can also feed 5.45x39mm ammunition through standard AK-74 pattern magazines. In addition to that, it can mount a GP-25 grenade launcher, as well as a bayonet, muzzle devices, and various other accessories. Supposedly a bullpup prototype was developed as well, but information about that is pretty slim. Although not a weapon in and of itself, the KMAK is a furniture kit made by the Russian military to modernize older rifles like the AK-74 and 74M, essentially turning them into the AK-200. You can differentiate one from an AK-200 by the rail system over the smooth dust cover, which is latched where the rear sight would otherwise go, the funky stock connector, and the regular selector switch still being on some. Now, the terminology is kind of confusing, so let me break it down for you. The KMAK, also known as the Universal Upgrade Kit, is the name for the upgrade kit itself, while the AK-PMO is what a rifle with the kit installed is called. Also, this guy's just Zach Hadel. Zach, what were you doing in Donbass on April 18th, 2022? Well, that's all the Russian AKs, but before we move on, it's time for
Fun informational gun tips with Celeste.
Have you ever seen a picture of an AK and wondered why there's a little square cutout in the selector switch?
No. Obviously I know what it's for. It's literally like the first thing I learned about at STI.edu.
Shut up! Not everyone has your arcane knowledge, Filbert. Anyway, that's actually to hold the charging handle back to keep the bolt from going forward.
That's all for this installment of Celeste's Fun Gun Facts.
Tune in next time or I'll post gore of your comfort character in general.
China, we ride China. Mao number 1. I give Xi Jinping big kiss on cheek. Mwah. We ride China so much. Glory to the CCP.
Are they gone? No? Whatever, I don't care anymore. China needed weapons after their communist revolution, so they decided to license the SKS, RPD, and of course, the AK from the Soviets. Now, despite the reputation of selling cheap, mass-produced garbage with child slave labor, Chinese AKs are actually of pretty good quality. The first model they produced was the Chinese Type 3 AK derivative with a folding spike bayonet. It's identifiable by its aforementioned folding bayonet and its front sight post being hooded. The gas block is also slightly different, being cut where the loop for the cleaning rod would pass through. The grips are usually checkered and slightly thicker, but plenty of them have non-checkered grips. Also, the magazine has a different pattern, having only 2 ribs at the bottom and no spine at the back. Funnily enough, the Type 56, not to be confused with the Type 56 or the Type 56, was originally classified as a submachine gun by the PLA in the same way the Red Army classified the AK. But the later stamped receiver version is where the real differences come in. In contrast with the AKM, it keeps most of the original furniture from the milled version, including the slanted stock, wood grip, smooth lower handguard, smooth dust cover, trigger, selector switch, 800-meter rear sight, in white bolt carrier, sling loop gas block, and vented gas tube. In addition to these carried-over features, the Type 56 also has a solid front trunnion, different rivet pattern similar to the RPK but without the bulges in the receiver, a lack of vent cuts on the upper handguard, a different magazine release, a single rivet on each side of the trigger guard, and a non-threaded muzzle. The front sling loop is also changed, from a solid piece to a thinner wire piece, identifiable if you're looking at the right side by the gap in the middle. Early models featured a square front trunnion, while later models use a slanted one. Another thing that changed over the years was the rear sight block, which at some point was updated with a more pronounced lightning cut. Keep in mind, the milled and stamped Type 56 rifles are both just classified as Type 56, so you'll have to clarify which one you mean if you're talking about it. Underfolder without the folding bayonet. Import models might have said bayonet, making them the fabled double folders, but official military models don't have them. The underfolding stock itself is slightly different, identifiable by its more squared shape. Models without the folding bayonet feature the Type 3 AK pattern of gas block rather than the cut version of the Foldy Boys. Later models, however, revert back to the cut version, but with an AKM pattern bayonet lug. Side folder with new red fiberglass furniture, often mistakenly referred to as Bakelite, and an AKM selector switch. Really only an export weapon, as the Type 81 was adopted shortly after its inception. Type 56-2 for finish use with a modified hammer spring to allow the rifle to fire finished 7.62x39. Type 56-2 crank with ash-colored furniture, a unique receiver with the AKM rivet pattern instead of the Type 56's, save for the proprietary rear trunnion rivet pattern, as well as a unique front trunnion and rear and front sight, gas tube and gas block, and muzzle. RPK clone that was never adopted and only made for export as the NHM91, as the Type 81 LMG was chosen for use instead. Milled export model of the Type 56 without the integrated bayonet. Type 56-2 and 5.56x45mm NATO with different furniture, an AK-74 style muzzle brake, and a bayonet lug on the front sight base designed for Indonesian police forces. Civilian Sporter, semi-auto only variant, typically fitted with a slant compensator and an AKM selector switch, identifiable by its singular selector notch and extended selector switch stop, which is found on all other civilian models. Real eagle-eyed autists will also be able to spot the lack of a third pin for the auto sear here, where it would otherwise be on all other full auto rifles, regardless of country of origin. There's also the underfolding 56S1 variant, the 56S2 side-folding variant, and the Type 56S3, which has red fiberglass furniture, sometimes having the grip of the Type 56-2, but usually having a new pattern of grip. Civilian version with a unique side-folding stock, being one of the earliest models imported into the US. Civilian Type 3 AK clone, but with a pinned barrel, no vent cuts on the upper handguard, only one rivet on each side connecting the trigger guard to the receiver, later pattern Chinese rear sight block, and some internal differences. There's also an underfolding version. Civilian Type 56 in either 7.62x39 or 5.56 with his ugly bulge furniture, an extended featureless barrel, and no accommodation for a cleaning rod. Even further cucked version of the Type 56S with a thumbhole stock and no bayonet lug or anything cool. Milled Mac 90 with a long barrel. Essentially a Mac 90 in 5.56. A very unique and rare AK from a bunch that arrived in port after Bush banned certain foreign-produced rifles. They were allowed to stay, but were given this weird thumbhole stock and had the bayonet lug filed off. Same as the last, but with an underfolding stock and a unique muzzle brake. The cuckiest of cucked rifles. It's in sporter configuration and has a unique rifle stock and handguard, as well as a unique milled receiver. Semi-auto export Type 56 and 5.56x45mm with an RPK-74 pattern flash hider. Underfolder. Side folder. Matte black fiberglass solid stock. Matte black underfolder. Matte black side folder. There are also target or match versions of these rifles that were made to circumvent the 1989 import ban on non-sporting rifles. You can identify them by the longer barrels. Chinese AK-74 clone. You can identify it by its wood grip, handguard without the dip above the palm swell, in-white bolt carrier, AKM pattern receiver rivets, a non-hooded front sight base with a more rounded lightning cut, and a slightly different gas block. They were proposed in a variety of configurations, such as 7.62x39 and 5.56 versions, as well as a Type 56-2 folding stock configuration, but I don't believe they were produced beyond a few example models. Side folding version. Chinese AK-103 copy for export. Its receiver is a mix of the Type 56 and side-folding AK receivers. It has a unique front sight and gas block. Weird semi-auto export bullpup. Export cross between a stamped Type 56 and an RPK. It has a hooded front sight as well as a unique stock, bipod, and compensator. 7.62x25mm Tokarev SMG derived from the Type 56. Pretty much every aspect of it is tweaked from the original Kalashnikov, but it retains the same principles. You got a receiver, safety, charging handle, dust cover, sights, folding stock, and all that good stuff. Saiga 12 with a shorter two-piece handguard, railed gas block with a different sight, traditional AK-style sight block setup, railed dust cover, magazine well dimple here, different safety lever, and a slightly different stock. Same as the last, but with a square thumbhole stock and an extended magazine well.
Albania, Albania, this is the song and anthem of Albania.
What can be said about Albania? This is my preferred place to flee when trouble's after me in one form or another. Not because I like it, but because nobody wants to go and check if I'm there. Anyway, they have some AKs, so let's go over them, starting with the Albanian Type 56 clone. It's commonly referred to as the ASH-78, ASH for Automatiku Skiptar, which means Albanian automatic, but its production name is the Automatiku Model 56. You can identify it by the lack of a dimple at the magwell and the front sight being different. How is it different? Well, I had some trouble with this one, as it was very unclear as to how exactly it was different. Everywhere I looked, it just said, "It's a mix of Chinese and Russian," without actually explaining how. But after further examination, I've discovered that it is unique in the way that it has the hooded front sight like the Type 56, but is beveled at the bottom of this hole like the AK. So if you want to identify an Albanian AK without getting into markings, look out for the lack of a dimple and the unique front sight. Also by the fact that it looks like it was made in some basehead's garage, because knowing Albania, it probably was. RPK version with a really long gas tube. Version with a rifle grenade spigot, gas cut off on the gas block, a latch to dust cover, and the rear sight moved to the dust cover. Underfolder ASH-78. Extremely rare stockless shortened tanker variant with a foregrip. The RDW-1 has a separate gas block and front sight, while the RDW-2 has them combined. There's also 1.5 billion experimental versions and specialized variants that aren't widespread, common, or important enough to go over, especially because there's almost zero information about Albanian AK variants anywhere. East Germany, you know, that place you heard about once in school, or more likely, an oversimplified video. You see, after World War II, Germany was split down the middle by the US and USSR, making a situation that was the geopolitical equivalent of a messy divorce. Anyway, with the worst half of the already bad post-war Germany being part of the Warsaw Pact, they had to start producing their own AK copy, obviously, the first of those being the East German AK clone designated as the Maschinenpistole Kalashnikov. It's pretty much the same as a Type 3 AK, save for the enlarged sling loops, no accommodation for a cleaning rod, and of course the serial numbers and markings and stuff. It can mount its own special illuminated sights, which are different to those of the AKMP. Unterfelden version. The KMS stands for Kalashnikov mit klappbarer Schulterstütze. East German AKM clone. Much like the Russian version, this model underwent various changes and improvements through the years, but these are typically most notable for using distinctive stippled resin furniture. It retains the enlarged sling loop, but hasn't moved to the handguard retainer like the AKM. Earlier models had wood furniture, while newer ones slowly introduced the iconic resin furniture piece by piece. Later models also introduced a new sight block without a step, while final production models used the second pattern AK-74 rear sight block, along with a flat gas tube lever similar to the one on the Type 1 AK. Strangely, this model uses the Type 3 AK rear sight that only goes out to 800 meters instead of the 1000 meter AKM sight. Speaking of sights, it too has its own special illuminated sight. Side-folding stock version adopted in 1972. The first version of the side-folding stock, often called the crutch stock, was created for export to Egypt. The second version, which was a wire side folder, was made for domestic use. What's interesting about this one is that, unlike nearly all other side-folding AKs, this one uses the same receiver as the MPI-KM, as the side-folding stock is a separate component. I believe the 72 was added to avoid confusion with the MPI-KMS, which is the original milled underfolder. Soviet RPKs that were refinished in East Germany. Design that was proposed to replace the RPK but was never put into production. Licensed East German AK-74N. The grenade launcher lug is more angled than on the Russian AK-74, the sling loop on the handguard retainer is smaller, and a ribbed butt plate was added to the stock. Additionally, they started to use the 1000 meter sights for this one. Like the MPI-KM, early models used the non-stepped rear sight block and a Type 3 gas tube latch, while later models used the later AK-74 sight block and the new East German gas tube latch. Wire folder 74N. The rear sling loop on this version is larger than the one on the MPI KMS-72. Short boy wire folder 74N. It has this unique barrel, compensator, and sight assembly, but besides those, it's pretty much just a regular MPI AKS-74N. Export MPI AK-74N with a flash hider and provisions for a bipod. Folder version. East German version of the RPK-74N with a shorter barrel and different design. It was going to be produced in 1990, but then the Cold War ended and production was cancelled. Trial versions used the classic East German resin furniture, while the finalized design saw a reworked setup and used the prototype East German black furniture, a derivative of which would be used on the East German 5.56x45mm NATO AK, meant for export, but cancelled before any significant production could take place. Wire folder version. Short boy wire folder. Very few are only ever produced as samples. Squad automatic weapon version. Like the 943, only a limited amount of samples were made. Marksman rifle version. Like the last two, only a couple sample models were made. They also made prototype 545 versions of the rifles under the 950 series rather than the 940, as well as 7.62x39mm versions in the 970 series. 22 LR training rifle for border guards, identifiable by its barrel, handguard, bolt carrier, and screws in the magazine. Export version of the MPI-KM. There's also the STG-AKMS, which is the folding stock variant. Custom export version of the MPI-KM, shortened like the MPI-AKS-74K. The early versions have the gas block and front sight base separate, while later models have a one-piece gas block and front sight. Export MPI-KM with a flash hider and provisions for a bipod. This one also has the folding stock version, the STG-AKM-SZ. Long barrel export MPI-KM with a flash hider. There's also a special version with a unique wooden thumbhole stock. Ah, Poland. Europe's favorite dumpster fire situated between the two worst neighbors in the whole continent.
What the fuck are you wearing?
What? It's a standard uniform of the Polish Armed Forces.
What?
Come on, look it up.
I'm a demon? What, do you think I have a computer or something?
There's one over there. How do you think I looked up all these different AK variants?
Okay, fine, let me just... I don't know how this thing works.
Damn, hell needs to work on its education system.
The whatchamawhat system?
Oh yeah, obviously hell doesn't have an education system. Can you leave?
Okay.
First, I'd like to state that Poland has a bunch of clones of the AK rifles, originally under the classification of PMK, but were quickly changed to the classification of KBK AK. Anyway, when it comes to derivatives, the first on the list is the Polish Type 3 AK clone modified specifically for firing rifle grenades, identifiable by this fancy metal stock piece here, as well as the removable rifle grenade launching spigot, cutoff switch on the gas block, and typically a 10-round blank magazine. Additionally, the dust cover release has an engageable lock to prevent it from flying off during grenade launching. Early models have flip-up grenade sights on the rear sight block, while new models have a detachable sight that gets mounted on the front sight. Later models also have AKM-style bakelite grips and laminate furniture. Like the name would imply, this is a modified version of the previous rifle's late pattern. The difference is that this version has a detachable stock. It was produced in a small batch of 500 after failed efforts to produce a folding stock variant. AK-74 derivative with a wire folder stock slightly different to the East German one it copied its design from, 3-round burst identifiable by the selector switch on the left side of the weapon, different selector switch that only operates the safety and not the fire mode, negligibly tweaked rear sight, new gas block and front sight, rifle grenade firing muzzle, and a reworked one-piece handguard retainer that holds both the upper and lower handguards, which in turn removes the need for a gas tube latch on the rear sight block, as it's held in place by the upper handguard itself. Early models had a bakelite palm swell lower handguard and a plastic upper, while later ones were black polymer like the ones on the AK-74M. WZ-88 Tantal with a WZ-74 pallid grenade launcher mounted. It also has a new handguard to go along with it. Prototype WZ-88 crank with 1.5 billion prototype variations and a rifle grenade firing muzzle booster. And no, attempting to fire a rifle grenade from a gun this small is not a good idea. 5.56 modernization of the Tantal. Though there are many variations, this model is most easily identifiable by its furniture, the padded folding stock, extended barrel, muzzle, and the rail system over the dust cover. More minor changes include cuts on the sight block for the rail system to fit into, and an extra rivet here. The variants of this model are the standard model, the same model but with a railed foregrip handguard. Version with a new grip, railed handguard, foregrip, clear magazine, enlarged magazine catch, improved safety switch featuring a third tab, and a fixed telescopic stock. Manufacturer model that allows you to make a rifle out of elements from the A, B, and C models. Little-known variant of an already esoteric gun, essentially just a barrel with a shorter 375mm barrel, a buffer tube stock, and a new grip, railed handguard, foregrip, and muzzle device. Non-standard crank version of the barrel. The most prominent identifying factor is the raised sight above the bolt mounted on the sight block. Like the normal barrel, it has 3 variants. One like the original barrel that was never mass-produced, one with a railed foregrip handguard that replaces the sight with a railed version, and one with rails and new furniture and other stuff. 545 by 39mm export version of the barrel that was proposed but never produced from what I could find. 7.62 by 39mm export version of the barrel with a slightly shorter barrel. Short-lived civilian version of the barrel with a bipod, an extended rail on the rear sight block, a new flash hider, and a folding front sight. A civilian barrel with no left side selector switch. It comes in 2 variants. Civilian mini barrel without the selector switch on the left side of the receiver. Semi-automatic civilian version of the barrel but chambered in 22 LR. A civilian barrel with a solid stock and no left side selector switch or grenade launcher mounting piece under the gas block. It comes in 2 variants. Stockless version of the mini barrel with the grip of the barrel 96C, a handguard similar to the polymer AK-74 version but with a windowed upper handguard and no left side selector switch. Same as the last but in 22 LR. It's identifiable by its bolt and magazine. Prototype bullpup version of the barrel. Never adopted for production, so only 2 prototypes exist. 22 LR AKM, identifiable by its 25-round magazine in the shape of a 7.62 by 39mm one, its selector switch, and perpetually open bolt. Carbine barrel AK with no stock and a hooded front sight gas block combo. There are various models with differing furniture and accessories, but typically it has a unique muzzle booster, flat gas tube latch, extended magazine release, and improved selector switch. AKMs in a variety of configurations and calibers, which can usually be identified by their in-white bolt carriers and different finishes. Export Sporter AKM with this ugly-ass thumbhole stock and a slanted rear receiver to go alongside it. Weird can-barrel tear gas launcher.
Automatic 51mm grenade launcher AK for launching tear gas and other riot control rounds, meant to be mounted on a base with 4 others as a crew-served weapon mounted on vehicles for riot control. It can be used as a handheld weapon, but for the love of God, no one should ever do that.
Don't make the joke, Celeste. Don't make the joke. Don't make the... Hungary sure was hungry for some AK derivatives. The first on the plate is the...
Hungarian milled boy. Just a copy of the Type 3 AK, but with solid furniture instead of laminate. From my research, I believe this was the only milled AK they produced, as I couldn't find any reliable sources that even mentioned something like an AKS-55 or an AKN-55. In official sources, it's just classified as the AK, but it's most commonly referred to as an AK-55 as to differentiate it as the Hungarian version. AKM with a funny foregrip forend. Peculiarly, this model uses a Type 2 style gas tube latch. Same thing, but with cheap plastic furniture. AKM with a distinct Hungarian grip, smooth handguard, and vented gas tube. In addition to the Type 2 gas tube latch, it has a unique non-stepped pattern of sight block. Underfolder. Modernized AK-63F with an AR-15 style buffer tube stock, a railed handguard, and a bipod foregrip sometimes mounted under a grenade launcher. Essentially a slightly tweaked version of the last rifle, most easily identifiable by having a railed dust cover rather than a side rail, as well as a different railed handguard and a 4-prong flash hider. Paratrooper special rifle that became the standard service rifle. It has a unique wire side folder stock, polymer grips, a featureless gas tube, short barrel, a big muzzle brake, rear sling loop on the left side of the receiver like the Type 3 AK, and an 800-meter rear sight. Later versions, ironically, had the plastic grips replaced with older wood grips. Sometimes you'll see these versions referred to as the AMD-63, but in reality there is no such gun. Even later versions feature modernized furniture such as rails and a new flash hider. Special rifle grenade launching AMD-65 with unique furniture, sights, and barrel. Civi AK-63F clone. You can differentiate it from the military rifle by the extended selector switch stopper. There are solid stock and folding stock versions, and some versions with AMD-65 length gas tubes. Sporterized SA-85M with a thumbhole stock, featureless muzzle, and no bipod lug or cleaning rod retainer. Civilian AMD-65 with a 16-inch barrel. Proprietary single-stack AKM with a 16-inch barrel, unique plastic furniture, and an AMD-65 muzzle brake. 5.56x45mm NATO export AMM with a PKM flash hider. Weird-ass 9mm SMG. Civilian version without a handguard.
Romania, what are they known for? Nah, come on, tell me what they're really known for. Wonderful. Anyway, I can't think of anything else to say, so let's just get straight into it. Starting out with the Romanian AKM. Early models were just clones of the AKM, while later models were equipped with the famous Romanian dong everyone knows and loves. Romanian underfolder with a reverse dong to allow for the stock to fold. Early models used the AKS folding stock rather than the AKMS version, while later models use a new stamped stock identifiable by the round shape and flat area here for the selector switch. PMMD-63 SBR with a unique stick stock and a conical flash hider typically fed by 20-round magazines. Romanian AK-74 inspired rifle, notable by its East German similar wire stock with a slightly different shape that utilizes a push button to collapse the stock rather than the lever used on other models of wire folder, as well as a steel 545 magazine, dong handguard, longer AK-74 style muzzle brake, front sight base that seems to be a blend of the Type 3 and AK-74 patterns, and unique angled charging handle. Early models were fitted with a new Bakelite dong grip, and non-dong handguards were experimented with as well, but these were disregarded in favor of the classic wood dong. Still, they did retain the Bakelite upper handguard. Some are fitted with the AG-40 grenade launcher, which looks similar to an M203. Additionally, this one of the rare AK variants that, like the Tantal, has a burst setting in addition to the auto and semi settings. PMMD-63 with a PAMD-86 wire stock. Short-barreled version of the PMMD-90 with a conical flash hider. SBR version of the PAMD-86 with a straight flash hider, no dong, and a unique rear sight that only goes out to 400 meters. 5.56x45mm NATO version of the PMMD-90. 5.56 SBR.
Modernized polymer version of the PAMD-87 with an RPK receiver. Romanian clone of the RPK. Aside from markings and stuff, there's not really any way to differentiate the early Romanian versions from the Russian version. However, later models come with a new pattern of bipod with adjustable legs. There's also a paratrooper variant with a heavy dong and the wire folding stock. RPK-74 clone based on the PAMD-86. It has the angled charging handle, bakelite upper handguard, and burst function of the MD-86, while also having a carry handle, steel 45-round magazine, hinged butt plate, and conical flash hider. Some models also come with a side-folding stock. Romanian 9mm SMG with a short dust cover and a heat shield barrel. Improved version with a new handguard, extending stock, and front sight. Designation for any export model, regardless of caliber or model. PMMD-63 export model. PMMD-65 export model. PAMD-86 export model. Civilian export version of the PMMD-63 imported by Century Arms. You can tell when a rifle is a Wazer because of the lack of receiver dimples near the magazine well, typically lighter wood grain, ribbed butt plate, and the black pistol grip. Originally, they were imported with thumbhole stocks and only accepted single-stack magazines, but after the assault weapons ban expired, they were allowed to be imported with standard furniture and double-stack magazines. Underfolding stock variant with a proprietary stock identifiable by the shaved inner. Variant made using former military rifle parts instead of new parts. 545 by 39mm variant. 556 by 45mm NATO variant. 9 by 19mm variant that uses Glock magazines. It does have the receiver dimple, but can also be distinguished by the bolt and lack of a rivet under where the bolt would be on a traditional AK. 22 LR cadet rifle, once again notable by the unique bolt and dust cover, magazine, and 2-rivet pattern receiver. Wazer 10, both a PAMD-86 side-folding stock. However, this version uses the traditional lever of other variants to collapse the stock instead of a button. Other identifying features are the combined front sight and gas block, a shortened gas tube, and an M16 pattern birdcage flash hider. Like the Wazer 10 paratrooper, but with a full stock and a standard length gas tube. Short AKM with no stock, smooth handguard, muzzle nut, a unique rear trunnion, and the hooded front sight gas block of the Wazer 10 paratrooper and RH-10. There's also the Russian Red version, which comes with a red wood finish and a Picatinny stock adapter. Shorter barrel version of the Draco pistol with a unique handguard. This one also comes in the Russian Red variant. Even shorter variant of the Mini Draco with the infamous handguard and unique rear sight and the dust cover instead of the sight block. Like the last two, it has the Russian Red variant. 9mm Draco pistol that uses Glock magazines has a shorter barrel, a rail dust cover, a rear sling swivel, and an AKM front sight. A NAC-9 that uses Scorpion Evo magazines. A NAC-9S with stock comes in either classic or tactical configurations. A CTS-9 with a full-length barrel. 9mm AK that can accept either Glock or Beretta magazines. It's pretty easily distinguished by its frankly repulsive furniture and incredibly compact size. It comes in either tactical pistol or Europe variants. There's also a slightly different version made by Chiappa, identifiable by its AKM front sight. AKM clone, identifiable by its furniture finish, unique dust cover, selector switch, and smooth handguard. It comes in Europe Classic, Europe Supra, and tactical variants. Carbine version of the RAK-1 comes in classic and tactical variants. Stockless SKR-762 with the same variants. 22 LR version of the RAK-9E, identifiable by its non-rail dust cover. Civilian PMMD-63, identifiable by its thumbhole stock and non-vented handguard. Wazer 10 with a thumbhole stock, unique lengthened muzzle nut, and a single-stack magazine configuration. PAMD-86 version. Same as the 991, but with a double-stack magazine configuration, identifiable by its magazine well dimple. You get it. PMMD-63 with a black grip and a featureless muzzle. 545 version. You get it, it's the last one, not in 556. Wazer 10 for the German civilian market, but with a magazine well dimple, straight flash hider, and smooth handguard. Underfolder version. Short barrel version with a longer flash hider. Straight pull bolt action version. Weird civilian RPK with a thin barrel, palm swell handguard, carry handle, AKM pattern receiver, AK-74 gas block, and AKM front sight.
Civilian PMMD-64 with the carry handle of the MD-93, a slant compensator, and a different finish. Some come with side-folding stocks.
You know this silhouette. It's unmistakable. It's big. It's long. It's what all the femboys want. It's the
PSL. That's right, although the SVD is not an AK derivative, this funky little thing is. Look closely. That's right, this thing is an RPK stretched out and modified to be an SVD at home, and also goes by 1.5 billion different terms. The civilian versions are identifiable by their lack of a bayonet lug, which is probably an improvement, because why the hell would you put a bayonet on a marksman rifle? Also, there's a very rare limited production run model, chambered in .308 instead of 7.62 by 54mm rimmed, identifiable by its different clear magazines. 22 LR AKM clone with unique black furniture and a magazine shaped like a 5.56 mag. RPK-inspired version. Romanian copy of the Vigar STG 941 and 7.62 by 39mm. There are various minor differences between this and the Vigar, but it's most easily identifiable by its front sight, muzzle, and lack of a bayonet lug.
Pump action AKM and an insult unto the Lord!
There's also the Par 2 chambered in 5.45 by 39mm and the Par 3 in 2.23. Bulgaria, what even are they? I searched up what is Bulgaria known for, and the computer so kindly provided to me by Satan, and all it showed me was this building. So, I guess that's pretty cool, right? If you're Bulgarian, sound off in the comments about your favorite and least favorite parts of Bulgaria. But for now, my favorite part of Bulgaria is the Type 3 AK clone, but with an AKM grip, a sexy bakelite handguard, and a plastic stock. Underfolder version of the last. The stock is slightly different, identifiable by the pinches here, and the longer squared part here would typically be rounded and closer to the rear. Weird prototype bullpup. It was proposed to be chambered in both 7.62 by 39mm Soviet and 5.56 by 45mm NATO, with an optional 40mm grenade launcher and bayonet. Modernized AKK with a slanted compensator, as well as a rail system, railed handguard, foregrip, grip fire selector, and buffer tube stock manufactured by Arsenal AD. Speaking of which, modernized version of the AKK with polymer furniture, a lipped dust cover retainer, and a pin barrel, produced by Arsenal AD. Underfolding stock variant. Version with an egg beater flash hider. Underfolder with an egg beater. Improved AR-1 with an AK-74 pattern of gas block and front sight and a smooth gas tube. Additionally, the sling points have been changed from the Type 3 pattern to the late AKM pattern. It's available in both 7.62 by 39mm and 5.56 by 45mm. Underfolding stock variant with the AKMS pattern stock. Okay, there are like a million different Arsenal defense models with slight variations with seemingly little rhyme or reason, so I'll just tell you how to identify an Arsenal defense AR. Milled receiver, pinned barrel, black polymer furniture, and waffle magazine. There's quite a bit of variety when it comes to the features, but generally the most typical setup is an AK-74 pattern front sight and gas block. They also come in RPK and Krinkov form. Civilian import AR with the same furniture that we previously saw in the NHM91, as well as a featureless muzzle, no bayonet lug, or any housing for the cleaning rod. Essentially an SA-93, but with polymer furniture partially taken from the AK-74, a muzzle brake, and a 90-degree gas block instead of the classic Type 3 pattern. There's also the SLR-96 that came in wood furniture, with some models having the classic 45-degree gas block and vented gas tube instead of the AK-74 pattern configuration. These two come in a variety of configurations depending on if they do or don't have muzzle brakes, side rails, or long barrels. The letters that designate each modification are as follows. A very unique AR with a slant-cut rear receiver and a proprietary thumbhole stock, handguard, gas block, and gas tube. It has an AKM dust cover and selector switch, as well as, for some reason, an AKS-74U sight block and rear sight. Type 3 AK with a pinned barrel. Arsenal AR-M1 with a muzzle brake instead of a flash hider. There's also a band-style configuration with a thumbhole stock and a different muzzle brake. Proposed 5.45 by 39 version of the SLR-101S that never saw production. AK-74M clone series. The traditional rifle model can be differentiated from the AK-74M by its front sight base, dust cover, and gas tube retaining switch. Essentially an early pattern AK-74 with black polymer furniture. 5.56 AK-74M series, which can be differentiated not only by the fact that it's in 5.56 and has a different magazine, but also typically has different furniture and accessories.
7.62x39 series, typically with an AK-74 gas block and Type 3 AK front and rear sights. It also comes in carbine and Krinkov models. Milled civilian 5.56x45 series in various configurations. Same story as the last, but in 7.62x39. Milled RPK with blonde wood furniture. Available as the RPK-3 in 5.45, the RPK-5 in 5.56x45, or the RPK-7 in 7.62x39. Arsenal Krinkov in 7.62x39 with an M-lock handguard, a buffer tube stock adapter, and an LMT SOP mod stock to go with it. AKM clone with a blonde finish, AK-74 stock, a more triangular palm swell, a unique front trunnion, the later pattern Type 56 rear sight block, and the front sight base, gas block, gas tube, and selector switch of the Type 3 AK. If you're super autistic, you'll be able to notice that the checkered patch on the grip is smaller than on a standard grip. Essentially just an AKM clone with different furniture. Pretty much just the SSR-56, but with a new 1.6mm receiver, identifiable by the weird shape of the magazine stabilizing dimple. Version with black polymer furniture and an in-white bolt carrier. Type 3 AK with polymer furniture, an AK-74 gas block and tube, a slant compensator, and a pinned barrel. A limited edition AK celebrating the 90th birthday of Mikhail Kalashnikov and the 35th anniversary of the AK-74. It's a final pattern AK-74 with engravings in either silver or gold. 400 silver versions were made, with only 100 gold rifles being produced. Finland, Finland, Finland. Why are they called the Finnish? Because they like getting finished in. But in all seriousness, the Finnish have quite a variety of AK derivatives, the first of which being the early production run of the RK-62 rifle based on the earlier RK-60 rifle prototypes, with the PT being added after to mark them as early production models. The RK-62 is a Finnish Type 3 AK derivative identifiable by pretty much everything. Different receiver shape, muzzle, gas block and tube, sights, selector switch, furniture, and stock. It is a solid pipe-style stock because the Finnish like it getting piped down. I'm just kidding, the Finns aren't gay. The Swedes are, though. Most PT rifles, however, have been retrofitted to the later model, The main production version of the RK-62 differs from the early models in the stock, sights with tritium night sights, gas block, and muzzle. Initially, it used mostly the same furniture as the PT model, but most have since been retrofitted for more modernized furniture. It has a magazine similar to, although not the same as, the Bulgarian magazines, but with a little ring here for whatever, I don't know. According to one Reddit comment, it's for making a tourniquet if you don't have one on hand. However, other randoms on the internet say there's a lanyard loop. So, what's the real use? I don't know. It's open to interpretation, Julian. Side folding individual. Modernized version with rails, a Magpul CTR stock, and a new selector switch. Further modernized version with a new handguard and flash hider.
Green version.
Chromed parade version. Updated version of the RK-62 made with intent to replace said rifle, but was unsuccessful in doing so. Instead, it was produced for export. This model is set up more like a traditional AK, with the sights being in the same locations. It also has new furniture and a stamped receiver with only one rivet above the magazine well instead of the traditional 2 or 3. Going into autistic detail, it has a different receiver, handguard and stock, non-sighted dust cover, gas block and tube, sights with the front sight having a flash hider and bayonet lug built in, and a shorter trigger guard piece. The civilian versions come in either 7.62x39 or 223 and have polymer and or wood furniture. Underfolder with an AKS stock. Chromed version with unique furniture for the Qatari Royal Guard. These ones don't have any sort of flash hider or bayonet lug. Stamped receiver RK-62, which introduced the modern furniture seen on other models. Unlike the AK and AKM, as well as the RK-62 and RK-71, the internals are interchangeable between the milled and stamped receiver versions. There's also an M76 variant made for the Indonesian Coast Guard and 222 Remington. Folding version. Civilian export version of the RK-62 that comes in either milled or stamped 62-76 pattern receivers, chambered in 7.62x39, 308, 243 Winchester, as well as 223 and 222 Remington. The designations for the furniture variants are on the screen now. RPK version of the RK-71 with either a polymer or wood handguard. It comes in either milled or stamped receivers with different stocks depending on which form, and is chambered in not only 7.62x39 but also 308 and 223. Sniper version with a reworked receiver and an SVD-style stock, which is usually in polymer but sometimes wood. Bullpup version of the RK-62-76. Civilian hunting rifle version of the RK-62 with a wooden rifle stock and handguard, slab-side receiver, sighted ribbed dust cover, new front sight, and featureless muzzle. It's sold in Finland as the Valmet Petra M83 and outside Finland as the Valmet Hunter M83. It was produced in 223, 243, 308, and 30-06. There's also the M88 version that has a different sight setup and a push-button safety instead of the traditional AK lever safety. Modernized version of the RK-62 created by Sako. You can identify it by the furniture, receiver, charging handle, sights, dust cover, gas block, gas tube, unique folding stock, muzzle, selector switch, and other parts. RK-62 with a stock and selector switch of the RK-95 for the Finnish border guard. Now, these rifles are commonly referred to with the RK being replaced by an M. That's because the export models are designated with an M instead of the former designation. There's also the civilian/S versions of these and semi-auto only. So, most civilian versions are going to be referred to with an M prefix and a /S suffix, such as the M62S, for example.
Shalom, Goyim. That's right, Israel has AK derivatives too. After all, God's chosen people need something to protect themselves from all the disgusting subhuman Gentiles. Anyway, strap in, because the first on the list is the
Israeli AK derivative based on the Finnish RK-62. It has various tweaks and differences, particularly its wood furniture, side-folding stock, carry handle, unique charging handle, and 35-round 5.56 magazine. Early models were made using RK-62 receivers, but they later swapped to their own produced receivers, identifiable by the smooth right side and unique cut on the left side. There are also variants in 7.62x51mm NATO that have longer barrels to boot. Some fun facts about the Galil are, it has a bottle opener on the handguard where the bipod is retained, and the bipod itself doubles as a wire cutter. There's a 50-round extended magazine for the Galil that looks like this. And finally, I shit you not, it was originally going to be called the Balashnikov because its designer's name was originally Yisrael Balashnikov, but he later changed his name to Galili, leading it to being named the Galil instead. Assault rifle version without the bipod provision on the gas block or carrying handle. Early models had new wood handguards, while later models sported polymer ones. Short assault rifle. Even shorter version of the SAR with a new receiver and furniture.
Well, would you look at that? It's the Sabbath. You know what that means, kiddies? I'm not allowed to work. But don't worry, I've got just the thing for this. Say hello to my good little Shabbos goy, Jacques Hutheron the 24th.
Am I getting paid for
Get
this?
to work!
Alright, let's see, I can't read.
Learn how.
Okay, let's do this. What's a gun? Import version of the Galil ARM with a thumbhole stock and 16-inch threaded barrel.
Forget it, that guy sucked anyway. Sniper version of the 7.62x51mm Galil ARM. Early versions have wood furniture, while later models have polymer and railed furniture. Not the highway. Or the other highway. No, Patrick, it's not the Halo SRS 99. Sniper version with various distinct features, but is most easily identifiable by its oversized circular handguard. Here's a chart going over the finer details. Next! Post-ban import version of the 308 Galil. It's in rifle configuration with a thumbhole stock, featureless barrel, different receiver, sights, charging handle, and other features, or rather, lack thereof. Sometimes they're converted into the Galatz version, and you can usually identify the conversions by the straight magazine release. Compact version of the Galil chambered in .30 carbine, identifiable by, well, let's be real with ourselves, but also identifiable by its small size, strange furniture, pistol grip guard, and SMG-style magazine. Modernized Galil SBR in 5.56x45mm NATO with a 216mm barrel. It has a new receiver, charging handle, stock, handguard, sights, grip, selector switch, and pretty much everything. Additionally, it has the M16A2 style compensator/flash hider, which is pretty much standard on everything nowadays. Another neat feature on the Ace, exclusive to the 5.56 models, is that it has a last round bolt hold open feature. Later pattern rifles have a rail over the entirety of the top of the rifle, a different grip pattern, thumb selector, dust cover button, and an optional cheek riser. There's also the Ace N21 version, which feeds through Stanag magazines instead of the typical 35-round Galil magazine. Carbine version of the Ace 21 with a 335mm barrel. Like the 21, it also has an N version, which feeds through Stanag magazines. Assault rifle version of the Ace. Unlike the last two, there's no official designation for an N version. 7.62x39mm version of the Ace 21. 7.62x39mm version with a 409mm long barrel. 7.62x51mm NATO version of the Ace 32, but with a different muzzle brake and a padded stock. There's also the Ace N52, which uses SR25 pattern magazines. 7.62x51mm NATO version with a 511mm barrel. Civilian Ace with a 16-inch barrel, no bayonet lug, and a folding stock. It has variants chambered in 5.56, 5.45, 7.62x39, and 7.62x51, with the respective model designations on the screen. Before moving on, I want to quick clarify that the 5.45 and 7.62 NATO models don't have the lightning cut seen on the other models. Same as the last, both an 8.3-inch barrel. Same as the last, both out of stock. There are also the following versions. There's also the Gen 2 series, which features the previously mentioned receiver without the lightning cuts, an M-lock handguard and folding Magpul CTR stock with a cheek comb, a new gas block without a front sight with no rear sight to boot, as well as a new lower piece on the 5.45 and 7.62x39 variants. Here's the model designations. A Galil Ace Gen 2 and 7.62x51mm NATO with a 23-inch barrel, a unique M-lock handguard, a smooth dust cover, a Fab Wraps stock, and other stuff mounted on its rails like a bipod, scope, and monopod. Modernized AKM with new pretty much everything. It's not very standardized aside from the furniture, but that's okay because the furniture is plenty distinct enough to recognize. You can identify an AK Alpha because it looks like a gun from the worst game ever, Valorant.
Hey, get up. Hey, you wake up. You wake up now, here.
I'm trying to sleep.
Hey, you can't sleep, man. You know me.
So I've been laying here for the last 14 hours for no reason. Dang it.
Nah, man, damn, you gonna sleep tonight, you know?
I don't want to. It doesn't make any sense.
Hey, man, it's heck right you know, dang old man. This man be a more comprehension, you know what I'm saying, man? No, I'm not talking about here. I mean somewhere worse. No. You know what I mean? You don't mean.
That's right.
Gary, Indiana.
Serbia.
Oh, God damn, man. They got this even worse.
I know. Nothing they do makes sense. I've been researching what designations mean what for this stupid AK bootleg, and every source I come across contradicts another. I don't even think the people writing about it know what they're writing about.
By goodness, I must say, that is absolutely horrible, and you have my sympathies. Thanks. God, Serbians really are the worst. I can't think of anything worse they've ever done. Yugoslavia. They existed once, until they didn't. Why did they collapse?
Racism.
Anyway, they reverse-engineered some AKs, leading to the creation of the unlicensed prototype AK copy with a rifle grenade device, different sights, and other modifications. Now, this isn't just a copy of the Type 3 or any other version of the AK. Instead, it's a proprietary reverse-engineered derivative.
Now, you may ask, why did they make their own version instead of just using the AK? Well, anyone that has even the most surface-level knowledge of Yugoslavia knows that it was essentially the most awkward place on Earth that was only held together by one guy with balls of steel that managed to simultaneously be on good terms with both the Western and Eastern blocs while still remaining an independent country. Now, I'm going to stop the history lesson here because the history of Yugoslavia and the countries that once comprised it is a topic deep enough to make a video comparable in length and detail to this one. All of this is to say that Yugoslavia wasn't really on great terms with anyone, including itself. So since they couldn't really get weapons from any other countries, they just peeked at the Russians' homework and made their own. There's also a prototype RPK version known as the M65. Underfolder prototype. Updated version of the M64 that was put into full-scale production. This model often gets mistaken for the M64, but is in fact the original M70 configuration. This particular model is very unique as it has a last-round bolt-hold open feature as well as a whole plethora of other features compared to a normal Type 3 AK. You can differentiate it from the standard AK by the longer, 3-vent handguard that isn't compatible with standard AK handguards, rifle grenade sights on the gas block, a thicker rubber butt pad, as well as a different selector switch, rear sight block, a gas tube latch, gas tube, and front sight. Speaking of sights, it has flip-up illuminated front and rear sights. In addition, the left side of the receiver features a distinct scalloped shape to accommodate the unique bolt-hold open feature. There's also a retaining pin on the rear of the receiver here to help keep the dust cover on, which blocks the retainer on the recoil spring from being pressed in if not engaged. The grips on early models feature a ferrule, while all future models are a complete grip. Milled bolt-hold open receiver model with an underfolding stock. The selector switch was updated, having 2 tabs instead of the one on the fixed stock model. Same as the last, but with a sight mount. This model boasts quite a few improvements over the standard M70. It still has a milled receiver, but has a press and pin barrel instead of the screwed-in barrel, a new front sight and selector switch, a trigger guard spacer with a selector switch stop like the AKM, and a straight stock instead of a slanted one, the rear of the receiver having a slightly lesser slant and only one stock tang. If you're just looking at the right side of the rifle, you can differentiate this one from the original because the B variant has this little pin here, while the original is smooth. Speaking of smooth, the left side of this model's receiver is flat, for some reason not having a lightning cut that would be on the Russian milled AKs. Milled receiver, press and pin barrel, underfolding stock. This is the first of the stamped M70s with an RPK similar 1.5mm receiver instead of the AKM's 1mm receiver. Its features include the previously discussed stamped receiver, a stepped bolt carrier, a slightly tweaked dust cover, a thinner magazine catch, a smooth gas tube rather than the previous vented one, and a slightly different gas block that is not only vented to correspond with a gas tube, but also has just 2 divots for the grenade launcher sight instead of the trench featured on the previous models. The final addition is the adoption of the AKM slanted compensator. Unlike the AKM, it retains the sling points, lower handguard rear retainer, and slanted rear of the milled model. Stamped receiver, fixed stock, mount for sights. Stamped 1mm AKM similar slab side receiver. The selector switch on this model has the 2 tabs like the M70A. Stamped receiver, new underfolding stock, new stepped selector switch. Stamped receiver, underfolding stock, mount for sights. Stamped receiver, underfolding stock, rifle grenade sight removed and fitted for a GP25 underbarrel grenade launcher. Milled RPK. Strangely, this one uses a shorter handguard than not only the M70, but also standard AK handguards. This model, with the same bolt-hold open receiver as the original M70, is often mistakenly referred to as an M64 RPK, when in fact it is just an M72. Although, strangely, it uses the front sight, gas block, and tube setup that the stamped models use. Also, it has a small metal retaining piece for the cleaning rod. Finally, since it wasn't planned to use rifle grenades, there's no dust cover retaining pin in the receiver and no grenade sight on the gas block. Milled RPK, pinned barrel. Stamped RPK. Stamped RPK, underfolding stock. 8mm Mauser M70 Sniper. You can identify it by its distinct magazine, long barrel, and peculiar stock. It has a milled receiver and a pinned barrel. 7.62x51mm NATO variant of the M70. Milled receiver, pinned barrel, fixed stock. If going by the previous designations, this model could be known as the M77B as it uses a milled receiver and a pinned barrel. But since there is no original variant with a milled receiver and a threaded barrel, this model can be seen as the base M77. Milled receiver, pinned barrel, underfolding stock. Stamped receiver, pinned barrel, fixed stock. There's a lot of confusion over what model and variants of the M77 are what, and I don't even think Zastava themselves know, honestly. But just to avoid confusion, and as I can't find any other clear designation, I'm going to refer to the stamped version as the M77B1. For some reason, instead of having an underfolding stock, they made a model with a side-folding stock.
Well, so instead of naming it the M77AB1, they named it the M77AB3. Whatever happened to the AB1 or AB2, who knows? The M77 series comes in rifle and RPK configurations, which are differentiated by AP to the end of the weapon designation for the rifle model and PM for the RPK variant. 5.56x45mm NATO M70B1 intended to be an AK-74 surrogate. Though proposed, I don't believe it was ever produced beyond a few example models, as I can't seem to find any real proof of its mass production anywhere. There is also the M88 underfolding stock variant. This is another obscure proposed model that doesn't seem to have ever been produced, essentially being a 5.56 version of the M72B1 with the addition of a carry handle. There's also the M82A underfolding stock variant conceptualized. Krinkov version of the M80. Improved M80 modified with a different muzzle and barrel setup. You get it.
We have the Dragunov at home!
A Zastava M70 scaled up to 7.62x54mm rimmed or 7.62x51mm NATO and is redesigned to essentially be an SVD. Early models have wood furniture and a milled receiver. It comes in polymer and railed boy polymer. 7.62x39mm version of the M85. Modernized M90 with new furniture, muzzle brake, and other modifications. There's also the M21 ABS railed version. Short-barreled version. There's also the M21 SBS railed version. Shorter barreled version. There's also the M21 BS railed version. Modernized M70B1 with a railed handguard, a folding stock, and the front sling loop moved to the handguard retainer. There's also the E2 version with a side rail and the E3 version with a top rail. M72 version of the M05E1. M77 version of the M05E3. M85 version of the M05E3. Version with a buffer tube stock. Civilian M21 with a railed handguard. Heavily modified M70 in 6.5 Grendel, boasting a new grip, stock, barrel, upper receiver, handguard, and pretty much everything else. Short-barreled version. Intermediate length version with a Stanag magazine adapter. 7.62x39mm only version of the M19. 7.62x54mm rimmed DMR version. Early polymer thumbhole stock M70 imported by European American Armoury. This model is a slanted rear receiver, single stack configuration, and a railed dust cover. Civilian single stack configuration, ergonomic grip, and a railed dust cover. Version with an AKM style 1mm thick receiver, a standard double stack bolt, and does away with the railed dust cover, returning to the traditional AK side rail. It also comes in a DF variant, which has an underfolding stock and no side rail. Version which uses the standard 1.5mm M70 receiver with a double stack configuration and a side rail. This furniture also has a new oily finish. Version with new walnut furniture, as well as a chrome-lined barrel, which is something that no previous Zastava rifles had. The sling mount is on the bottom of the stock like the early AKs, presumably to facilitate the side rail. Civilian M77. An initial version with a polymer thumbhole stock and handguard was shown off as the M96A, but seems to have been redesignated as the M77PS. Civilian M85 without a stock, sold as a pistol. The previous model, but with a Stanag magazine adapter. Civilian M90. Polymer furniture variant with a Stanag magazine adapter made by Century Arms. Civilian M92 without a stock, sold as a pistol. M05E1 with an M90 flash hider and new grip. Prototype Yugoslavian inbred love child between the M70 and HK MP5. You can identify it by its 9mm magazine well and shortened bolt, as well as its MP5-like handguard, unique folding stock, and other little things and stuff, I don't know. There's also the integrally suppressed P version, which I don't think went past the drawing board, and the K variant with a shortened barrel and an MP5K-inspired vertical foregrip. Well, that's all I shambled together. Zastava, if I got any of these wrong, please tell me all the designations so I can fix my mistakes.
It's pronounced Zastava, not Zastava.
I'm an American, goddammit! I don't care how you pronounce it. The way I pronounce it is the right way. Got that, you slimy, red-eyed, pulse-smoking cream puff?
Okay.
Oh boy, it's time to look at the guns implemented by the laughingstock of the entire world, North Korea! Woo! Starting out this shit list, we have
North Korean Type 3 AK copy, not a Type 56 clone. North Korean AKS clone. North Korean AKM copy with a unique front sight that has a bigger hull, a Type 3 gas block both an AKM bayonet lug and gas holes, a heavier barrel like the Type 3, a sling loop on the receiver, which means there's no loop on the stock, a handguard without the palm swell but also without the metal ferrule at the rear, and a unique selector switch similar to that of the Type 3 AK. Underfolder version with a slightly different stock than the Type 3 it copied. Shitty North Korean AK-74. It has a metal magazine, a more rounded hole on the front sight block, and a unique gas block that seems to be a mix of the AK-74 and Type 3 AK gas blocks. Later models, sometimes mistakenly referred to as the Type 98, have polymer furniture and a helical magazine that, while some say holds upwards of 150 rounds, is questionable in regards to if it even works, or is just a plastic hull meant to look scary. Side folder. Top folder with the helical magazine that probably doesn't work if we're being honest. There's also a short version that I can't find any info on, just pictures. There are also RPK, Sniper, Bullpup, and OICW variants with almost no reliable information about them online because, well, it's North Korea. Although the good old US of A obviously doesn't have any official AK variants, there are various civilian versions made by various producers and custom versions by smaller workshops that lean more on producing upgraded versions of pre-existing models, such as a modernized Saiga AK with various modifications, including a railed forend, railed dust cover with new sights, unique gas tube, thumb safety selector, and either a buffer tube stock with an M249 grip or a polymer AK-74 stock and grip. Updated version of the KTR-03S with a different rail system over the dust cover similar to the barrel. AKM with a polymer AK-74 stock, a custom handguard, sighted gas block, sighted dust cover, railed rear sight block, a threaded muzzle brake, an improved selector switch, and an extended magazine release. There are 3 versions of the core rifle, the original M-Lock handguard version, the quad rail handguard version, and the wood furniture configuration. Shorter-barreled version of the core with a collapsible buffer tube stock, a different muzzle device, and an improved trigger. There's also the AC-18A2 variant, which has a lengthened handguard, which itself has the AC-18A2LB variant, which just has the barrel length of the core rifle. The PD-18 is essentially the same as the AC-18, but with a shorter barrel and a CNC Warrior folding brace. Modernized 5.56 AK with a custom M-Lock handguard, waffle magazine, railed dust cover, US palm grip, Picatinny stock adapter with a Sig Sauer telescopic folding stock, Midwest Industries sights, and an M16A2 muzzle. Now, there are numerous Krebs custom upgraded AKs, but since those are more custom variants, I'm not going to get any deeper into them. If you want to check them out for yourself, there are various models. I just felt that the models I went over were unique and popular enough to mention. A heavily modified Chunky Boy AK shotgun. This thing's been modified so much I'm not even really sure if it's an AK anymore, honestly. It's essentially the Atom Smasher of AK pattern shotguns. It comes in long barrel, short barrel, and breaching configurations. Weird AK shotgun that looks kinda like if you asked someone to draw an AK from memory. Version with an M-Lock handguard, a new stock, different sight setup, sling mount on the gas block, a new sight block, a ribbed dust cover, and a new magazine latch. A new Magpul similar handguard. Version with a collapsible stock, side rail with a Picatinny rail mount and a red dot sight on it, no magwell, new grip, new handguard, round charging handle, and a new magazine latch. A version of the skeleton stock, new receiver and handguard, a railed top cover, and various other minor changes. Wood hunting stock version.
But dead rotting zombie slash, JTS shotguns are manufactured in China. Why did you put them in the American section?
You ask? Well, first I'd like to say that calling me a zombie is incredibly rude and offensive, but second, the guns themselves are manufactured in China, but they're originally designed in America, so I decided to include them in this section. American Saiga clone, identifiable by its different furniture and a new 5-round magazine. Tactical variant of the KS-12 with rails on the handguard, collapsible stock adapter, different muzzle, and 10-round magazine. Short boy version of the KS-12T. This is classified by the ATF as a short barrel shotgun, so you gotta go through a whole heap of paperwork and crap before you're allowed to buy one. There's also the Comrade version, which is ever so marginally shorter and has a pistol brace instead of a stock. Rifle stock variant of the KS-12T with an M-Lock handguard. Sawed-off version of the Commander. In total, it's longer than 26 inches, so it's just long enough to not be a felony! Civilian AK-101 clone with a windowed waffle magazine. Civilian AK-103 clone. Solid stock version. Cucked rifle stock version of the KR-103 with a muzzle nut instead of a muzzle brake. Civilian AK-104 clone. Civilian pistol version of the AK-104. American civilian PP-19 Vityaz clone with a Longboy civilian barrel. Version with a fake and gay mock suppressor that's only there to cover up the fake and gay civilian barrel. Civilian clone with a standard length barrel. The previous gun with no stock. Saiga bullpup conversion kit sold by Kushna Pup LLC. It fits all Saiga calibers, so you can have a bullpup 12-gauge shotgun. AK bullpup conversion kit. It supports a variety of different AK patterns and receivers, even including shotgun models. Another bullpup conversion kit for whatever AK you want to throw in it. AK series have numerous setups and chamberings, but can typically be identified by their unique selector switches. A Type 3 AK with a pinned barrel, an AKM dust cover, handguard, selector switch, and early AKM bolt carrier, AK-74 butt plate, new finish, unique ergonomic grip, gas block, rear sight, magazine catch, gas tube latch, front sight, compensator, and magazine. Also, it doesn't have any accommodation on the rifle for a cleaning rod for some reason. There's also a sporter version that has polymer furniture and a railed handguard. It even comes in pink. Aw, isn't that cute? Now the Hello Kitty girls have something to murder people with. Short, stockless version of the C39 with the railed sporter handguard, an M16A2 pattern compensator, a sling swivel on the rear, and a unique sight block. Some have a shark fin front sight gas block instead. Even shorter version with a unique wooden handguard and railed sight block. The love child of an RPK and the C39. I don't really have to explain this one, frankly. A C39 with a different finish, flat AKM-style rear trunnion and stock, classic-style front sight and rear sight, unique smooth dust cover, cutout selector switch, and proprietary side rail. There are also two variants that come with Magpul furniture, one coming with the MOE furniture and the other coming with the Zhukov furniture. A C39 V2, but with the front sight gas block combo of the C39 pistol and the flash hider of the Wazir 10 paratrooper. For some reason, the grip is made out of wood on this one, I don't know. There's also a Magpul variant, which, strangely enough, has the Zhukov stock and the MOE handguard. A shorter, stockless version of its namesake with a new half-hood front sight gas block, slanted compensator, and pin here. This one also has a Magpul iteration, only having the MOE version, as the Zhukov furniture obviously wouldn't fit. The Magpul version has an M16A2 pattern compensator. Essentially a C39 V2, but with the stamped receiver, slant compensator, and side rail of the AKM, as well as its own unique front trunnion. Like the C39 V2, it comes in Magpul, MOE, and Zhukov variants. Version with a short barrel and no stock or side rail, and a muzzle nut instead of a slanted compensator. It's also got the MOE version with the M16A2 muzzle. Pretty much the Raz-47, but with a standard patterned grip, enhanced selector switch, square front trunnion, and an RPK receiver, but with an AKM rivet pattern. This one does have a cleaning rod. BFT-47, but with a 12.6-inch barrel, no stock, M16A1 pattern birdcage flash hider, an enhanced selector switch, an extra rivet here, don't ask me why, and the gas block of the Raz-47 pistol. Same thing as the BFT-47, but with an AK-74 similar setup and a US palm grip instead of the standard pattern. 5.56 version of the last one, but with red furniture. Similar to the BFT-47, but without the RPK bulged receiver, while featuring a block front trunnion and a normal selector switch. Also, it doesn't have a cleaning rod for some reason. Yet again, it has a Magpul Zhukov variant with a US palm grip and the compensator of the C39, as well as a synthetic version with black polymer furniture. Alt version like the C39 Tactical and the RH-10. You get it, there's a Magpul variant. Version like the VSKA Tactical, both a short gas tube and half-hood front sight. It typically sports a synthetic handguard and a Circle 10 fixed triangle stock, but also comes with an MOE variant. Version with no stock, an orange US palm grip, a non-hooded front sight gas block, and a unique muzzle brake. There's also an MOE variant which has the M16A2 flash hider and comes in a variety of finishes. Stockless version of the VSKA with the front end of the C39 Micro. Unique milled receiver, compensator, trigger, vented and railed gas tube, M-lock handguard, and a fluted barrel. Non-unique features include a US palm grip and magazine, a Magpul DT carbine stock, a BFT-47 dust cover, gas tube latch bolt carrier, and enlarged T magazine release lever. Essentially a BFT-47 pistol with a 7.5-inch barrel, railed sight block, US palm grip and M-lock handguard, a Picatinny adapter rear that usually comes with a Strike Industries bifolding pistol brace mounted from the factory, and a BDS-37 muzzle brake. Milled receiver version of the Hungarian AK-63D. Stamped version. How do you differentiate it from the Hungarian version? Well, it's actually quite easy. You see...
It's me, Satan. Now, although it is very difficult for the untrained eye to see the difference, you can tell when an AK-63D or SA-85M is actually an AK-63DS by the selector notches, markings, the selector switch stop, and the presence of the third pin. You see, the AK-63 is the military, fully automatic version, and therefore has there the third pin and 2 selector notches. As for the markings, it has an infinity symbol for auto and a number 1 for semi. The SA-85M, as Celeste explained earlier, is the civilian version with no third pin, only 1 unmarked notch in the middle, and an extended selector switch stopper. The Sensory Arms AK-63DS has a standard length selector stop, 1 notch at the semi position with an F marking for fire and an S marking for safe. Anyway, that's all. Now, where were we? Celeste! Get back to work!
Ukrainian bullpup AK-74. Ukrainian bullpup AK in different calibers. Ukrainian semi-auto hunting AKMs. Civilian AKMS with an AKS stock. Civilian AKM with a unique side-folding stock. Civilian AKM. Civilian AKM with new tactical furniture. There's also the Fort 227, which is a clone of the Galil Ace 22, or the Fort 228, which is their clone of the Galil Ace 31, and the Fort 301, which is a clone of the Galil sniper rifle. Straight pull bolt action AKM with a massive integral suppressor and bipod. Early models seem to use a stock similar to that of the PKP, while later models use a buffer tube stock. Belarusian AKM made using Molot parts with an RPK receiver and a unique front sight and gas block. South African Galil ARM clone with a different stock, polymer handguard and magazine. It uses the Finnish RK62 receiver like the early Galils. There's also the R5, which is a clone of the Galil SAR, and the R6 that is a shortened barrel version of the aforementioned R5. A futuristic-looking bullpup version of the Vector R4. If you want to know more about it, go watch the video I've already made on it. Weird Starship Troopers-looking derivative of the Vector R4 that was thought up with rifle and carbine versions, but I don't believe they went past the proof of concept phase. Myanmar-ish... I don't care. Myanmar Laliosan Galil derivative. You can identify it by its unique furniture and its unique receiver, some of which, I presume to be early models, have stamped receivers similar to the RPK. There's a couple variants of this gun, those being MA1 with heavy barrel and bipod, MA1 with short barrel and folding stock, MA1 with short barrel and permanently fixed underbarrel grenade launcher, sniper version of the MA2 and 7.62x51mm NATO with a long boy barrel. There's also the Mark II versions with new furniture and magazines and stuff. Obscure Swedish Galil derivative identifiable by its green. It comes in the ARM, AR, and SAR configurations, the most produced version being a derivative of the SAR version designated the FFV-890C. Italian Galil AR/ARM clone. This one can be adapted to mount the M203 grenade launcher though, so that's cool. Galil SAR clone that can accept Stanag magazines. Cuban AKM with a Galil-style side-folding stock, an AK-103 muzzle brake, and a domestically produced Patria 1 sight. Modernized Colombian Galil clone available in AR, SAR, and MAR configurations. Rare Czechoslovakian AK with various modifications, having unique receiver, sights, barrel, handguard, grip, stock, and pretty much everything. It comes in standard, RPK, and Krinkov configurations. 22 LR AK derivative. Version stylized off the Galil. 22 LR AK bootleg. Comes in Wood, Black, Rebel, Omega, Omega Burnt Bronze, Tactical RAS Full-Length Rail, Tactical RIS Short Rail, and Mikhail Kalashnikov 90th Birthday. Shitty Pavan RPK wannabe with a milled Type 56 receiver. Later models had stamped receivers instead. Milled AK with an optic side rail and reddish-brown polymer furniture. An improved AKMN with 74M furniture and a unique handguard that mounts an underbarrel grenade launcher. There's supposedly also a proposed STL-1B variant that will have Picatinny rails and other modernizations, but I can't find anything further on the topic. Vietnamese Galil Ace derivative in 7.62x39mm. Comes in various different configurations, with the primary model being the STV-380. There's also the 215 carbine, longer barrel 215 called the 270, and the STV-022 SBR. Additionally, more recent models have been shown as prototypes, those being the STV-410 and the STV-416. The STV series also had two known prototypes, those being the GK1 and GK3 assault rifles. They appear to be similar rifles, albeit not the same, with most glaring differences being the GK3 has an obvious grenade launcher and a dust cover rail, while the GK1 has a side rail where the GK3 has its selector switch. On top of that, they have slightly different handguards, and even the receivers are noticeably different. 5.56 variant with Nemlock handguard, different stock and barrel setup, a Stenag mag adapter, and a different flash hider. Amphibious rifle version in 5.56 meant for use both underwater and on land. Sniper version. Vietnamese Bison clone with a Galil-style folding stock. It's believed that the two designations are 7P for 7.62x25mm Tokarev and 9P for 9x19mm. The 9P also goes by the designation of STL-15. Egyptian AK that's just a bum-ass AKM clone. No, the one clip you saw on YouTube Shorts is wrong. There's no difference between the AKM and ARM, save for the markings and finish. There's also the folding crutch stock variant, and the semi-auto civilian variant. As mentioned earlier, the crutch stock was originally made by the East Germans for import to Egypt, but then the Egyptians copied it. In addition to the ARM, there's the RPM that has a 20-inch barrel, bipod, and thumbhole stock, and the RML, which is an import version of the ARM with a thumbhole stock and featureless muzzle, which comes in either the standard or 20-inch barrel length. Post-ban ARM barrels look like the RML, but can be distinguished by the welded-on muzzle nut rather than the featureless muzzle. Indian AK derivative and assault rifle and SAW configurations with 20 and 30 round magazines respectively. It comes in orange and black polymer furniture. There's also a Kalantek carbine version, a modernized Excalibur version, a derivative called the IAR chambered in either 5.56 or 7.62 NATO, and an AMOG modernized PDW chambered in 5.56x30mm. PDW chambered in 5.56x30mm Minsas. It's essentially the result of the MP7 and Uzi, while the AK watched in the corner. I don't need to go into any further detail about this one, as I'm sure most of you remember this thing from Black Ops 2. Slightly tweaked Indian clone of the Arsenal ARM-9F. Ethiopian clone of the North Korean Type 68 with a black stock and handguard similar to the East German pattern, but with an AK-74 pattern plastic grip. Indonesian modified AKM and 5.56x45mm NATO with rails and sheath produced by Excalibur Army. It has a UTG Pro quad rail handguard, a DLG Tactical TBS sharp stock, and black Pioneer Arms waffle mags. Armenian weirdo bullpup. Weird little Lithuanian SMG. Wacky Slovenian AK.
We have Scar L at home.
This fucking weird thing from Croatia.
We have G36 at home, Grandma.
Turkish AKM clone with railed furniture and a different muzzle device. There's also the SAR 308, which has bootleg mag pull furniture. I'm not sure why it's called the 308 if it's chambered in 7.62x39, but oh well, that's bootlegs for you. Never mind, it was Iraqi. Not that there's any difference, but I have to be technical here. Anyway, the Tabuk is a modified version of the Zastava M76, but rechambered in the 7.62x39mm using the M72 receiver in stock, but with a cutout instead of the full one. It has a longer barrel, usually sporting a PKM flash hider, and a distinct grip I like to call the Chunky Boy. There are also clones of the M70B1 and M70AB2, as well as a carbine version with a unique muzzle, front sight gas block, and gas tube with a cut-down Bulgarian AKK handguard. Iraqi clone of the Zastava M72B1. Type 56 clone with an East German polymer grip and a plastic handguard similar to that of the Type 56-2, both coming in either a brick-colored or black finish. Side folder with a stock similar to the East German MPI KMS-72, as well as the Polish Tantal and Romanian PA MD-86. Underfolder with a stock similar to the Type 56-1, but with an extra rivet here. AK-103 clone with a Type 3 selector switch, ribs on the sides of the dust cover, a more square front trunnion, and sometimes a different grip. There's also the later AK-133, which is a 1-to-1 clone of the AK-103, but with different markings. Algerian copy of the stamped Type 56. There's also the modernized PM89A, which has unique black waffle furniture and Tapco magazines. Underfolder version. This one also has a PM89 1A version with the unique furniture. Cross between the stamped Type 56 and the RPK. It's essentially an RPK, but with a Type 56 receiver and a bipod similar to the one on the Type 87S. It too has the modernized FMO3A version. Underfolder version. The modernized version is the FMO3 1A. Pakistani AKMS with a black polymer handguard and an ergonomic grip. Not a real designation, just a Khyber Pass copy made by some Pakistani guy with some unpronounceable Arabic name like Phil. Japanese reverse-engineered AK-74 prototype with smooth black furniture and a rough finish. Now, you probably didn't know that Japan had an AK derivative. Well, they don't. At least, their government didn't. You see, this prototype was manufactured not by the Japanese Self-Defense Force, but rather by a doomsday cult known as Aleph, better known by their former name, Omo Shinrikyo. One-of-a-kind Kalashnikov pattern rifle and 50 BMG made by the YouTuber Brandon Herrera, also known as the AK Guy. Although I probably didn't have to explain that to you, the chances that you know of me but not Brandon Herrera are practically non-existent. Quick thing before we finish. Now, there are plenty of guns that, in one way or another, are similar to the AK, but are different enough in function to not fall under the classification of being an AK pattern weapon. Though it looks vaguely similar to an AK, it's an entirely different design and system, with the only real element shared between the two being the round they're chambered in. While the Type 81 looks kinda like an AK to your short-sighted grandmother, it's actually more similar to the SKS internally, basically being the love child of the SKS and AK. Despite somewhat resembling an AK-74M, it shares almost nothing in common with the AK besides the magazines, ammo, and grip. Like most Soviet small arms, the APS was modeled off of the AK. However, the rifle itself is something completely different. In the same way as the APS, the SVD and the Bullpup SVU variant are built to be like the AK in function, but internally it uses an entirely different system. Although they were built off the AK and bear a lot of resemblance to it, the overall design both internally and externally vary quite significantly in comparison to the AK. Essentially a modernized version of the AS-Val without the integral suppressor. Basically a scaled-down version of the SR3, chambered 9x21mm with a magazine housing and the pistol grip. Really just cheaper versions of the SR3 with a simplified design and operation. Even though the SG550 and its derivatives use essentially the same operating system as the AK, I consider the overall design of the rifle to be different enough for it to not fall into the classification of being an AK variant. Much like the 550, though it uses the same operating system as the AK, it's different enough overall to not really be an AK. Alright, and with that, I'm done! That's all the major AK variants and derivatives I could find. If someone like Brandon Herrera or some other guy that knows more about what he's talking about like point out any other mistakes I probably made, I'd love to hear it so I can fix it. But for now, that's it.
Ha! Take that, Satan! You hear that, you big ugly lizard? I don't know. I completed the challenge. Now let me go back to Earth.
Fine. You have entertained me for long enough. Now get out of my face.
Finally!
Hey guys, now that I'm out of hell, I'd like to hear which AK variant you like the best. Seriously, I want to know. Comment your favorite now. Well, I'm not sure what I'll do, but I'll certainly appreciate it. As for me, my favorite AK variant, out of all the ones I just went over, would without a doubt have to be the M4A1 carbine. Well, looks like I'm about to be brought back to life. See you guys soon!